Chapter 2411. 9 Bridge of Trials. After Narcissus Island disciples reached a consensus, the group directly set out to the inner area. All they had to do was just go deeper into the tomb and manage to reach the inner area in just one day. The inner area was much smaller than the outer area. They were greeted with a barren open space. In front of the open space was an abyss that was filled with a thick fog and raging fire. The crazy burning fire was enough to burn any divine demons into ashes. The void hovering over the abyss was covered with thunderclouds, and there were flashes of horrible-looking scarlet gold thunder within it. The scarlet gold thunder was enough to make first-class divine demons palpitate. There was no doubt that no one would dare to approach either the thunderclouds above or the fiery abyss below. The only way to pass through the open space was a stone bridge connecting the middle of the abyss, both ends. In between the two ends of the abyss, there were 9 stone bridges. Each of the 9 stone bridges was extremely long and looked like some ancient architecture. The 10 Narcissus Island disciples were standing before the abyss. "This is the abyss of trials, where the 9 trials are," said Zhong-yi. The other disciples looked at the abyss in front of them, with eyes especially filled with excitement, while they studied the 9 stone bridges. The 4 opportunities of Saint's Tomb. The most precious one was no doubt the 6 seats for looking at Fongtian Scroll. Placed second was the inner area's 9 trials, which could bring about 9 opportunities. The 9 opportunities which were left behind by the Crimson Stone Saints included his valuable inheritance. The 9 trials were in the abyss of trials, specifically on the 9 stone bridges. The 9 stone bridges were called Bridge of Trials, with each trial bridge representing an arduous test. One had to walk through the trial bridge to the abyss other end to collect the opportunity. Originally, there were 16 trial bridges in the abyss, but as the tomb had been opened many times in the past, 7 of the trial bridges have been overcome. The trial bridges with their accompanied opportunities claimed, then collapsed directly into the fiery abyss. Since the tomb has just been open for a few days, disciples from various sects are currently staying in the outer area to collect purple amulets. We should be the first group to enter the inner area. With no one here now, Junior Brother Wei Qing, and those of you who are injured should restore your strength and state as soon as possible. Those of you who are fine can try breaking through these trial bridges. If you are lucky enough to pass through one of them, it will benefit you a lot, said Zhong-yi. The disciples nodded, and either immediately went to work on recuperating or headed to the 9 trial bridges. Zhong-yi looked at Su Tong again. "Junior sister Su Tong, you are very talented in spear combat skills. The master of Saint's Tomb, Crimson Stone Saint, had achieved a high spear combat skill level before his death, so that must be his legacy. You should try out the trials. The trial bridge which leads to the Crimson Stone Saint's inheritance should be the 5th bridge, the one right in the middle." Su Tong looked eager. She entered the tomb for Crimson Stone Saint's precious inheritance. She knew that Crimson Stone Saint was at the superior level of an undying saint and must have set up a very tough trial, since many geniuses experts from Wuxia Wilderness who were better than her and also skilled in spear combat had also failed the trial. She thought there was an 80% chance that she would also fail the trial. Then again, she should still give it a go. Su Tong walked towards the 5th trial bridge. In the previous battle, Jian Wushuang did not suffer any injuries, hence he did not need to spend time recuperating, and walked towards the 9 trial bridges. "I wonder what are the trials in these 9 trial bridges, and what opportunities that come with it." Jian Wushuang smiled and went on to individually investigate it. Those 9 trial bridges were extremely mysterious. As soon as Jian Wushuang stepped on the bridges, he would immediately know the opportunities that he could gain after crossing those trial bridges. The opportunity for this first trial bridge turned out to be a cultivation secret technique for 100 refining divine demon. Jian Wushuang was a little surprised, but he immediately shook his head. He was not interested in the cultivation secret technique at all, since he already had 2 cultivation techniques: primordial void, celestial body, and thousand perils body. Both secret techniques were within the top 10 cultivation techniques in the ancient god domain. One was the strongest secret cultivation technique of the ancient race, and the other was the 5th strongest secret techniques of the 7 Stars Black Sect. Any one of them was very well sought after by countless experts. The 100 refining divine demon that appeared before Jian Wushuang might be well sought after among the divine demons in Wuxia wilderness, such that even gods and experts were after it, but that was only because they had no chance to obtain higher-level cultivation secret techniques. As for Jian Wushuang, that technique did not appeal to him at all. Jian Wushuang did not attempt to cross the trial bridge, as he was not interested in that opportunity. Soon, Jian Wushuang arrived at the 2nd trial bridge. Oh, saber skills created by an undying saint himself. Jian Wushuang raised his brows, but proceeded to the 3rd trial bridge. After passing by all the trial bridges, Jian Wushuang knew about the opportunities that came with them. All the opportunities left by the Crimson Stone Saints were indeed good, and there was a myriad of them. There were skills, secrets, and treasures. There was a unique bronze bell treasure among them. The bronze bell had mysterious secret patterns on it, and those secret patterns were of great help in understanding the destruction law. Unfortunately, what Jian Wushuang wanted was not the destruction law, so the bronze bell was of little use to him, and he was also unable to pass the trial bridge where the bronze bell was located. After walking through 7 trial bridges in a row, Jian Wushuang did not find any opportunities that were useful to him until he set foot on the 8th trial bridge. As soon as he set foot on the 8th trial bridge, a message immediately came to him. Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly lit up. The opportunity that came along with the 8th trial bridge was the insights and swordsmanship skills left by an undying saint. The undying saint was the Purple Blood Saint. Purple Blood Saint's purple blood swordsmanship. A trace of joy flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. According to the trial bridge's message he received, the Purple Blood Saint, also known as the Purple Blood Sword Saint, was an extremely terrifying, undying saint during his lifetime. He was also a terrifying sword cultivator who had a deep swordsmanship understanding. The purple blood swordsmanship that he created was also very famous. What the trial bridge kept was the insights of Purple Blood Saint and the complete set of his purple blood swordsmanship, an undying saint-level sword cultivator, and his insights were very appealing to Jian Wushuang. Chapter 24:12. The sword principle trial. In terms of insights enlightenment, Jian Wushuang had received insights of space-time law and transmigration law back at the Narcissus Mansion in Narcissus Island. Those 2 insights were incomplete and were at a very low level. Despite that, they were a great help to Jian Wushuang to understand the 2 major laws of time, space, and transmigration. Lying before his eyes now was the swordsmanship skill left by a sword cultivator at the undying saint level. Even though I understand the sword principle, my speed will naturally be slower if I'm blindfolded, as I have been exploring it on my own. If I have a complete set of sword principles, I'll know what to explore next and how to explore further. It'll definitely be helpful in improving my swordsmanship faster. The sword principle insights left by this Purple Blood Saint is particularly important to me. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly together. Not only did the Purple Blood Saint leave his sword principle insights, but also created the purple blood swordsmanship. For Jian Wushuang, what attracted him was the insights. Although the purple blood swordsmanship was useful to Jian Wushuang, it was not as useful as the sword principle insights. I guess I'll give it a go. Not sure if I can pass this trial bridge, mumbled Jian Wushuang secretly. The sword principle and purple blood swordsmanship, left behind by the purple blood saint, were available only after he passed the trial bridge. He would not get either of them if he failed to cross the bridge. On the 8th trial bridge, Jian Wushuang had taken his first step. The moment he took his first step, he saw different sceneries in front of him. It was a dark void. Jian Wushuang stood in the very center of the void, and in front of him was a shadowy figure. Jian Wushuang could not clearly see the hazy figure, which was holding a long sword in his hand. He had a pair of weird eyes that were looking straight at Jian Wushuang. This space has 81 floors. You are currently on the first floor. After you defeat me, you will enter the next level and meet a stronger opponent than me. You have 10 days. If you pass all 81 floors within 10 days, you are considered to have passed the test. The hazy figure spoke monotonously, but Jian Wushuang could hear him clearly. Jian Wushuang shook his right hand and noticed that his power had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary third-class divine demon. So, the power remains at the level of an ordinary divine demon's, and we are competing purely with our swordsmanship. Jian Wushuang raised his brows. The trial bridge reminded him of the sword principal trial tower, where he had been in his previous life for thousands of years. The sword principal trial tower was an opportunity given to him by Emperor 13. During the 1,000 years he spent in the sword principal trial tower, he had a new understanding of sword principle, and his swordsmanship cultivation was greatly improved. The trial bridges test was very different from the sword principal trial tower, but its essence was similar. It was basically a swordsmanship competition, with the only difference being his opponent's swordsmanship and sword principles understanding constantly improving with each test level. Only 10 days. I don't have time to waste. Jian Wushuang smiled and immediately started attacking. Buzz. Fuzzy sword light flashed. Jian Wushuang was fighting against the first floor's hazy figure. In just a split second, Jian Wushuang's sword pierced through the hazy figure and passed the first floor. The first floor is easy. Jian Wushuang smiled and went on to the second floor. Soon, he passed the second floor, followed by the third and fourth floors. It did not take long for Jian Wushuang to pass the first 10 floors before carrying on. While Jian Wushuang was working through the 8th trial bridge, Su Tong stood with her eyes closed on the 5th trial bridge. They were both in a darkened space, but Su Tong was fighting against 11 people instead of one. Those 11 people were all black-armored sergeants. All of them were wielding black spears and were extremely skillful. They worked seamlessly with each other, which brought a lot of pressure to Su Tong. Most importantly, the number of sergeants increased as time went by. Su Tong's face remained emotionless as she wielded her spear with both skill and dexterity, silently sweeping across like a phantom. The black-armored sergeants advanced towards her one after another, but she managed to ward them off with her spear and single-handedly fought those 11 black-armored sergeants, while remaining on the advantageous side. However, good times did not last long, and in the dark void, 2 black-armored sergeants appeared out of thin air. There were now a total of 13 sergeants against Su Tong. Su Tong's face sank, but she calmly dealt on. She tried her best in the dark space and improved herself in the process of fighting with those black-armored sergeants. Her set of spear skills became more nimble and flexible during combat. No one from the outside knew about the scene. Like other Narcissus Island's disciples, they only saw her standing on the trial bridge, but could not see what she was facing. Right at the deepest part of the tomb, a consciousness hidden in an independent space covered the entire inner area and even the entire saint's tomb. Whether it was the outer area or the inner area of the saint's tomb, everything that happened in every corner was clearly visible to this consciousness. What Su Tong and Jian Wushuang were facing on the trial bridges were clearly seen by the consciousness. At that moment, the consciousness focused all its attention on the fifth trial bridge. This young lady is pretty good. A vague figure was floating in the hidden independent space and muttering to himself. Although at the beginning she didn't have a very good understanding of spear combat skills, after entering the trial bridge and being tested in a battle with the black-armored sergeants, she was able to continuously improve her skills. Her speed of improvement was remarkable. She is now obviously better than when she first entered the trial tower. She is very talented in using a spear. The vague figure was admiring Su Tong. However, he was only admiring her, but did not have a high expectation. He knew fully well that even though Su Tong was skillful with the spear and her comprehension ability was also outstanding, there was still a gap from his expectations. Su Tong might be able to hit the second half of the fifth bridges tests, but it was not realistic for her to completely pass it. True to his assumptions, as the number of black-armored sergeants increased alongside their more tacit teamwork, Su Tong was placed under a lot of pressure. She was nervous as compared to the calm demeanor that she started with. Su Tong was defeated when the number of black-armored sergeants almost reached 30. Chapter 24:13. Crimson Stone Saint on the fifth trial bridge. Su Tong's eyes were wide open. Did you fail? There was a trace of regret in Su Tong's eyes with a little bit of loss. She was mentally prepared for the outcome and had also gained a lot from the trial bridges test, which was a good experience. In that hidden independent space, 29 sergeants. It's not bad to be able to get to this point, at least much better than the young men who have arrived in previous sessions. The vague figure slightly sighed and fell silent once again. He made a decision after some time. Although you can get to this point, you are still unable to become my disciple, but I will not let you go empty-handed. The vague figure thought of something, and a token was thrown out the very next second. On the fifth trial bridge, Su Tong, who was about to turn around and leave, suddenly stopped as a shot of light was aimed directly towards her from the end of the trial bridge. Su Tong reached out and caught it. It's a token? Su Tong was startled and consciously glanced around with a surprised look on her face. It's spear skills. 2 sets of spear skills. Su Tong was overjoyed. The token she received had 2 sets of spear skills. The 2 sets of skills were the first 2 sets of the strongest spear skills handed down by the Crimson Stone Saint. Su Tong was extremely stoked even when there were only 2 of them. Thank you, Senior. Su Tong bowed at the light source and respectfully gave her gratitude. Su Tong bowed again, seeing that there was no response before suppressing the excitement in her heart, and turned around to leave. In the hidden independent space, these 2 sets of spear skills are simple, but they should be of great use to this young lady. At least before she becomes an ultimate god, both sets of skills will be of great use to her. Even when she becomes an ultimate god in the future, it would still be useful to her for some time. The vague figure smiled, faintly. He was the Crimson Stone Saint. Of course, it was just his consciousness. He had been staying in Saint's tomb for so many years. He watched a large number of talented disciples in the Wuxia wilderness enter the tomb and show their strength and talent in front of him. His ultimate goal was to find a suitable successor for himself. Even if the disciples failed his test and were not able to receive his inheritance, he would give away some opportunities to them as long as he appreciated their skills and talents. Just like what he did to Su Tong. Although Su Tong failed the 5th trial bridges test, he still gave Su Tong 2 sets of his spear skills. I hope this young lady can grow up well in the future. The Crimson Stone Saint smiled faintly, and his eyes finally moved away from Su Tong. In fact, when Su Tong began her tests on the 5th trial bridge, the consciousness of the Crimson Stone Saint had been paying attention to her and did not care much about the others. It was only after Su Tong left the 5th trial bridge that he started to look around at the others, especially those who were wandering on the 9 trial bridges. What? The Crimson Stone Saint that hid in the independent space was shocked and instantly locked on his consciousness to another trial bridge. That was the 8th trial bridge, where Jian Wushuang was. He did not pay the slightest attention to that bridge or Jian Wushuang before, but at that moment, he could clearly see what was happening on the 8th trial bridge. 40th floor? This young man who is only a chaotic realm has reached the 40th floor, and that was all in just one day. Though he was the Crimson Red Saint, it still took him by surprise to see Jian Wushuang still standing firmly on the 8th trial bridge. Jian Wushuang was fighting against his 40th opponent within the dark space where the battle was. On the 40th floor, his opponent's swordsmanship had become extremely sharp and intimidating, while his understanding of sword principles was just at the profound sword principle realm. Jian Wushuang remained calm before the formidable opponent. His figure moved quickly along with his long sword, which swept, stabbed, or charged forward under his will and command. Each movement was performed effortlessly, yet it was smooth and sleek. He did not use any extraordinary sword skills, nor did he use any of his own great technique inventions like the time-space sword technique and reincarnation sword technique. He had completely suppressed the opponent in front of him with just a couple of arm-swinging movements. Hence, he did not take long to go through the 40th floor. Jian Wushuang entered the 41st floor. He is on the 41st floor and has passed half of the 8 trial bridges tests while still being relaxed and casual. He doesn't even use a lot of sword techniques. If I'm not wrong, he can easily pass through the first 60 floors and may even hit the 70th floor. He really is a genius in swordsmanship. Crimson Stone Saint was amazed. He was just admiring Jian Wushuang's fast progress, but had little hope that Jian Wushuang could completely pass the 8th bridges trial. After all, the 8th trial bridges test would only become harder as he progressed further. Furthermore, the 8th trial bridge was also the hardest challenge among all bridges. It was much more difficult compared to the 5th trial bridges test that was accompanied by Crimson Stone Saint's inheritance. A fact the saint himself admitted. The test on the 8th trial bridge was not set by Crimson Stone Saint himself, but by the Purple Blood Saint. Purple Blood Saint was an extremely terrifying, undying saint. He was much stronger than the Crimson Stone Saint at his peak in terms of strength. He was exceptionally strong in sword principles cultivation, and the purple blood sword technique that he had created when he was at his peak was a nightmare to many cultivators when he utilized its full strength. Although the Crimson Stone Saint previously had never fought head-on with Purple Blood Saint in his life, he witnessed the scenes when Purple Blood Saint used his self-invented sword's techniques to kill his enemies. Each of his direct sword thrusts sent toward his enemies had instantly killed them, causing 9 powerful saints to be killed in a short time. That terrifying strength sent Crimson Stone Saint in awe. The test set by such a strong expert was naturally much more demanding than the Crimson Stone Saints. It's a pity that many tests in my old tomb area, including those set personally by the Purple Blood Saint himself, were made for the Divine Demon realm. This young guy is just a chaotic realm. Had he broken through the Divine Demon's realm and got a higher understanding of sword principle, it may be possible for him to completely pass the 8th trial bridge. Crimson Stone Saint sighed as he kept staring at Jian Wushuang from then on. He was watching Jian Wushuang's performance on the 8th trial bridge. Chapter 2414. Complete sword principle. Jian Wushuang was still fighting his opponents on the trial bridge. He very calmly and easily defeated his opponents. Crimson Stone Saint was not surprised either, as he had foreseen that Jian Wushuang could make it to at least the 60th floor and possibly even the 70th floor. It was no doubt that Jian Wushuang could easily pass through the 40th floor. What took Crimson Stone Saint by surprise was that Jian Wushuang decided to stop advancing when he had just broken through the 50th floor. He stayed and sat down on the 51st floor, and instead of continuing the fight against his opponent there, he was seen seated with his eyes closed on the trial bridge. What is that young man doing? The Crimson Stone Saint was a little surprised. He had no idea that Jian Wushuang had entered an enlightenment state. He sat there cross-legged while reflecting in his mind on his earlier dueling experiences against those 50 opponents. Although the opponents did not put him under too much pressure, his sword principle understanding had been improved in the process. In fact, Jian Wushuang's understanding of sword principles had reached the profound sword principle realm many years ago. He kept on studying over the years. Although he was exploring on his own, nonetheless he had made great progress. Before entering Saint's tomb, Jian Wushuang's sword principles understanding was at the profound sword principle realm, just a small step away from achieving the complete sword principle realm. However, that small step was a bottleneck in his journey. In his process of fighting against each and every opponent who had outstanding swordsmanship on the 8th trial bridge, Jian Wushuang saw light at the end of the tunnel. Sword principles. Jian Wushuang was reminiscing the many duel scenes with different techniques that he had learned from it. Not only had he reflected on the scenes where he fought against the 50 opponents, but he also traveled down his memory lane whereby he had performed a myriad of sword techniques in the past, along with all the powerful swordsmanship techniques that he had observed from past experts. One of them was the sword technique performed by Emperor 13 in his previous life. Those scenes were flashing through his mind. Jian Wushuang was thinking and meditating in full concentration as time was slowly passing. The trial bridge remained calm while he was in the enlightenment process. The 51st opponent stood readily in front of Jian Wushuang, but he would not make the first move if Jian Wushuang did not attack. It's been 3 days. This young man actually stayed on the 51st floor for a full 3 days. I believe he must have gotten some enlightenment, but he should really complete the test. It's not too late to go into meditation after the test, isn't it? Crimson Stone Saint gave Jian Wushuang a strange look in that hidden independent space. Only 10 days were given to complete the test of the 8 trial bridge. The time was barely enough, yet Jian Wushuang had spent 3 days on his enlightenment process. 3 days later, Jian Wushuang finally opened his eyes. At the moment he cracked open his eyes, an astonishing sword light flashed. An intense sword essence immediately rose in Jian Wushuang's body. It was something completely different from the sword essence that Jian Wushuang emanated 3 days ago. It was much stronger, and entirely 2 different concept levels. It was clear that Jian Wushuang had achieved a completely different understanding of sword principles. He had a breakthrough from the profound sword principle realm to the complete sword principle realm. That was a qualitative transformation, as both realms were incomparable. It feels good to have achieved the complete sword principle realm. Jian Wushuang smiled. He could feel his swordsmanship reaching a whole new level that could bring about a huge improvement in terms of strength, power, and accuracy when he wielded the sword. Jian Wushuang stood up after taking a deep breath. The Crimson Stone Saint, who was hiding in darkness, had also noticed Jian Wushuang's changes. This kid actually broke through. He was taken aback, even though he was Crimson Stone Saint himself. He thought that Jian Wushuang had probably gained a deeper understanding of the sword principles and made a small progress, but little did he expect to see Jian Wushuang had broken through to the complete sword principle realm. He had crossed over into the complete sword principle realm from the profound sword principle realm. That was a huge breakthrough. How is this possible? A chaotic realm actually achieved the completed sword principle realm. The Crimson Stone Saint was struck in awe. Sword principles were something enigmatic. Typically, merits in sword principles were achievable by experts in Divine Demon's realm. A chaotic realm must be a genius to achieve the same level. It was a rare case for divine demons to achieve the profound realm. Many peak divine demon realms struggle to reach that level, let alone a first-class divine demon. As for the complete sword principle realm, only the most outstanding peak divine demons could achieve that level. Under normal circumstances, even ultimate gods who were good with sword techniques could hardly achieve that level. Further beyond the complete sword principle realm was the real sword principle realm, which was only achievable by extremely strong and powerful ultimate gods. Crimson Stone, Saint saw a real monster, an incredible sword principle monster, a chaotic realm that achieved the complete sword principle realm. This kid, I thought that he could at least overcome the 60th floor, and there was even hope for him to pass the 70th floor. But now that he has achieved the complete sword principle realm, the 70th floor will be easy peasy. He should be able to pass through the 75th floor. ITLL depend on his luck if he's able to break through all 81 floors, murmured Crimson Stone Saint. The 8th trial bridges tests were designed by the Purple Blood Saint himself, and were the most difficult tests in Saint's tomb. Even though Jian Wushuang was at complete sword principle realm, Crimson Stone Saint still did not think that Jian Wushuang could pass those arduous tests. Jian Wushuang did not waste any more time and faced his 51st opponent. I just made a breakthrough. It's good to have all of you to sharpen my skills. Jian Wushuang grinned as he simply took out his sword. It was not a fancy move, but it was far more precise than before. His opponent on the 51st floor could not handle Jian Wushuang's move at all, and was instantly defeated. Jian Wushuang then continued entering the 52nd floor. Jian Wushuang defeated each and every one of his opponents without a bead of sweat. It took only half a day for him to move from the 51st floor to the 70th floor. Chapter 24:15. Trial past Jian Wushuang's speed significantly slowed down upon reaching the 70th floor. Such was quite the norm, as the 81 levels of tests in the trial bridge grew harder as it went along. It's already the 70th floor, but this kid still has no intention of showing his sword skills. Crimson Stone Saint had been watching Jian Wushuang and not really paying attention to the other genius disciples in Saint's tomb. He could clearly tell that while fighting in the test space against his 70th opponent, Jian Wushuang was just attacking arbitrarily. Even though his moves were all incredibly sophisticated, he never once showed real sword forms or masterstrokes. Even so, the 70th opponent was completely suppressed by him, still holding back. Crimson Stone Saint frowned. However, even if he is holding back his abilities and not wanting to showcase his sword skills or masterstrokes, he could have easily defeated the 70th opponent with his understanding of the sword. Having said that, he has been staying rather long on the 70th floor. Yes, it was taking a bit too long. It had been a full hour since Jian Wushuang fought against his 70th floor opponent, but had not defeated him yet. This kid, no. Crimson Stone Saint's pupils shrunk suddenly. I get it. This kid probably doesn't see the 81 floors as trials. On the contrary, he sees it as his perfect testing ground, using his opponents as practice for his sword skills and improving his understanding of sword principles. It had been such since the very beginning. Hence, he had been holding back his abilities and fought his opponents with the most simple basic sword skills. Furthermore, he really gained many improvements after practicing in this way. His understanding of sword principles had a direct breakthrough when he passed the 50th floor, achieving complete sword principle realm. At the moment, even though he has achieved complete sword principle realm, he is still practicing his sword skills with those opponents to upgrade himself. He is still improving. Crimson Stone Saint's face was completely stunned. Still improving? Indeed, Jian Wushuang had been constantly improving from the moment he stepped into the test space of the 8th trial bridge and started fighting his first opponent. Even at that very moment, his improvement speed was still rather fast, even though he had reached the complete sword principle realm. Crimson Stone, Saint could clearly see that the sword skills which Jian Wushuang displayed at the 70th floor were even more sophisticated than right after he had broken through into the complete sword principle realm at the 51st floor. Obviously, his understanding of the sword principles had improved again in such a short time. He just had a major breakthrough in sword principles. How does he continue to improve at such a terrifying speed? Murmured Crimson Stone's Saint. He was speechless when it came to evaluating such a sword principle's genius. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang's talents in sword skills were truly extremely horrifying. After all, he was an undying saint who had been to many realms during his mortal life and seen many extremely unusual occurrences. However, judging solely based on the sword talent, there was really no one comparable to Jian Wushuang among all the genius experts that he had come across. At the very least, he had never seen another genius swordsman who could directly leap into the complete sword principle realm while only at the chaotic realm. He had not come across anyone who could still unscrupulously improve after having a major breakthrough in sword principles. His improvement in sword principles, using the test space and opponents as practice, was really too fast. At this rate, the current challenge would be Crimson Stone. Saint's heart froze, but right away felt incredibly looking forward to it. Another half-day flew by. Within that half-day, Jian Wushuang had only advanced from the 70th floor to the 75th floor. The progress may be very slow, but his improvements were big. Jian Wushuang could not hold back any longer when reaching the 75th floor. He had to use his sword principles. Space-time sword principle, transmigration sword principle, and Xianluo sword principle were all in full display. Xianluo sword principle was an incredibly perfect and flawless all-rounder sword principle. However, both space-time and transmigration sword principles were his own creation. They were both masterstrokes. It was a mesmerizing sight as he used them. Such an amazing young man. I had still underestimated him. I knew that he had an extremely high understanding of sword principles, but I didn't expect him to possess such terrifying comprehension capabilities as well. Those sword principles that he had created and performed were incomparably sophisticated. One is a perfect fusion with the space-time law, while the other was a flawless combination with the transmigration law. Most importantly, his insights on both space-time and transmigration laws are also immensely profound. As expected, his space-time law was incredibly close to forming a hologram, while being also quite well-versed in his transmigration law as well. Was he only in the chaotic realm? Crimson Stone, Saint, was actually incredibly experienced. He was merely shocked by Jian Wushuang's talents in sword skills before this. However, Jian Wushuang's law insights had also been exposed as soon as he displayed his sword principles. Perhaps nobody could reach his level either, though it would be more difficult for him to improve as steadily as before the moment Jian Wushuang revealed his sword principles. After all, he would not be able to hold back anymore once he showed his masterstrokes. The opponent could not ward off his attacks and be immediately defeated. Jian Wushuang eased through the 75th and 76th floors. Although the next 3 floors presented some challenges to him, Jian Wushuang still passed through them. It was not until the 80th floor that he finally encountered an opponent who imposed an immense pressure on him. However, the larger the pressure, the happier Jian Wushuang became. He was entangled in a fierce fight with his 80th floor's opponent. He gave his all and fought for almost an hour. An hour later, he passed the 80th floor. Within that 1 hour, his sword skills had also improved by a lot. That improvement also brought him opportunities to pass both the 80th and final floor. Jian Wushuang unleashed his full potential on the final floor. He slowly gained the upper hand during the fight by utilizing his consistent improvement and finally narrowly defeated his opponent. At that, Jian Wushuang had broken through all 81 floors of tests on the 8th trial bridge. On the trial bridge, Jian Wushuang's senses exited the tests and opened his eyes. "I passed." "That was pretty difficult," mumbled Jian Wushuang to himself. Previously, as a perfect chaotic creature with a terrifying comprehension ability, he thought that it should not be difficult to pass the sword skills test on the trial bridge. However, the fact remains that he almost did not pass through all the tests. The sword test's difficulties were beyond his expectations. However, he did not know at that moment. Crimson Stone Saint, who was constantly hiding in the dark, was even more stunned. "Did I really pass?" Chapter 24:16. The collapse of Trial Bridge. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Nobody knew more than Crimson Stone Saint about how difficult it was to cross the 8th trial bridge. Most importantly, because almost everybody who entered Saint's tomb was second-class and first-class divine demons. The trial was designed based on that divine demon level as a standard. This also meant a mere chaotic realm fighter had passed challenges that were for first and second-class divine demons. Miracle! That was the only word Crimson Stone Saint could use to describe that moment. Too bad this kid is gifted in sword principles instead of spear principles. Otherwise, Crimson Stone Saint was obviously feeling envious. He was envious of Purple Blood Saint, who left behind his sword principles insights and sword skills only to be obtained by a real sword genius, even a sword freak. If Purple Blood Saint knew that his sword skills were passed down to an incredible genius, he would probably be smiling in his dreams. As for Crimson Stone Saint himself, he had placed his inheritance inside Saint's tomb as well. However, he could not even find a genius disciple who was barely up to his standards. On the trial bridge, with Jian Wushuang passing the tests, 2 light streams burst out and directly shot at him from the end of the bridge. The 2 light streams were 2 jade slips pieces. One of the jade slips recorded Purple Blood Saint's insights on sword principles. The other had Purple Blood Saint's Purple Blood Sword principle. "Thank you very much." Jian Wushuang took the jade slips and slightly bowed toward the end of the trial bridge before turning around and left. Just as he was leaving the trial bridge, cracks started appearing on the surface of the bridge that connected 2 abysses and started shaking violently. The trial bridge collapsed within only a second. Its countless debris fell into the abyss below and was completely swallowed by the sea of fire. The 8th trial bridge had disappeared. Surrounding the edge of the abyss, other than Jian Wushuang, the rest of the 9 Narcissus Island disciples were gathered there. Almost all 9 of them took their chances on the trial bridge, but none, including Zhongyi, could pass the tests. The only person who actually obtained something was Su Tong. For better or worse, she learned 2 spear forms while nobody else gained anything. It's almost been 5 days, and Jian Wushuang is still on the trial bridge. "Isn't this odd?" asked one of the core disciples. Someone else nodded. "It's a little odd, as he is on the 8th trial bridge. I know the tests, there consist of 81 floors with a gradual increase on each floor's difficulty level. It's probably the hardest challenge of all. Saint's tomb has opened so many times, and so many swordsman geniuses tried crossing that trial bridge, but the best performance so far was a genius swordsman from 8,000 years ago called Lin Meng, who passed the 73rd floor. To be able to pass the 73rd floor is considered marvelous, but still far from passing the entire test. The designated time frame was only 10 days. Now that 5 days have passed, and Jian Wushuang still remains in there, I would guess that he has at least passed the 50th floor. Breaking through 50 floors, isn't that quite something asked a surprised core disciple. Barely. After all, the challenges get harder with each floor. It's quite feasible in the beginning. If someone could pass 50 floors, he would probably be considered a medium-level genius among all the swordsmen who entered the tomb this time. However, taking into consideration that he is only in the chaotic realm, it's really quite amazing to be able to reach that point. The disciples were just chatting casually. They were not in a hurry, as they had tried out all the tests which they should have tried. All they had to do now was to restore their energy and wait patiently for the arrival of other sects' genius disciples and the final 6 positions to appear. As for how many days Jian Wushuang could remain on the trial bridge, it did not concern them. However, right then, the ground started vibrating. What's going on? The 9 Narcissus Island disciples were immediately alarmed. In only a matter of seconds, they discovered the vibration's source. It's there on the trial bridge. It's the one that Jian Wushuang is on. Exclamations of surprise rose as everybody looked over at the trial bridge, which Jian Wushuang was on. However, Jian Wushuang had already left the bridge at that moment. It began to collapse as soon as he stepped off the trial bridge. Within only a few moments, the 8th trial bridge completely vanished from everybody's sight. The 9 Narcissus Island disciples at the edge of the abyss were all dumbfounded by the mere sight of it. It collapsed. The trial bridge has collapsed. Does that mean they all looked over in disbelief at Jian Wushuang's direction? They knew quite a lot about Saint's Tomb. Hence, they naturally knew what a collapsed trial bridge symbolized. It symbolized that the opportunity presented by the test had already been obtained. The test was gone. Thus, the bridge collapsed and vanished forever. This proved that somebody had passed the 8th trial bridge's test, since it had collapsed. Who would that be? It was surely Jian Wushuang, without a doubt, who had remained on the bridge for a total of 5 days. My apologies for making you wait, senior brothers. At that moment, Jian Wushuang was already standing before the 9 disciples. Jian, junior brother Jian Wushuang. Zhongyi looked at Jian Wushuang at a loss and asked with a slight doubt, "You passed the test on the trial bridge?" I had pretty good luck," said a smiling Jian Wushuang. "You really passed it?" Zhongyi felt a little numb on the skull. The core disciples around him were feeling the same way. Nobody could believe it. The 8th trial bridge was such a huge challenge that after so many openings of the Saint's Tomb, the previous best-performing genius swordsman could only pass the 73rd floor. However, it was passed through by someone merely at the chaotic realm. The most unbelievable part being this someone was only at the chaotic realm and merely a Narcissus Island outer disciple. An outer disciple passed the hardest test. And yet the core disciples, including the one considered strongest among them, other than Su Tong, did not get anything from the trial bridge. If anyone among the core disciples could still barely remain calm, it was probably Xiao Heng. Xiao Heng knew how terrifying Jian Wushuang could be. In contrast to the fact that Jian Wushuang could defeat first-class divine demons when he was only at the middle stage chaotic realm, him finishing the arduous test with his chaotic realm was much easier for him to accept. Chapter 24:17, Sword Principle Insights. It was a temporary shock, and the 9 disciples gradually calmed down. However, the way they looked at Jian Wushuang was filled with envy, with a hint of jealousy mixed in it. Yes, it was jealousy. There were 9 trials left in Saint's Tomb, and each came with an enormous opportunity. Those opportunities were something strongly desired by everyone, but the opportunity on the 8th trial bridge had been obtained by Jian Wushuang. It's junior brother Wushuang's own ability to live up to the challenges on the 8th trial bridge and receive the opportunity in it. It's useless for us to feel envious. Zhongyi waved his hand and became composed again. However, Any of the trial bridge's opportunities could make countless experts drool over it. It makes sense to assume that the opportunity junior brother Wushuang acquired is something many people are dying to have, so we should be extra careful from now on. The core disciples' faces each turned serious upon hearing that. Yes, the sin falls not on the man, but the possession of the Jade One. There were no guarantees that none would come to pursue after such a precious opportunity from the trial bridge out of greed. Fortunately, we arrived early at the inner area. Now that we're here, the only ones around are us from Narcissus Island. So only we who witnessed the trial bridge's collapse and knew that junior brother Wushuang was the one who broke through it. As long as we don't say anything, the genius disciples from other sects wouldn't come to pursue us even if they realized the trial bridge has vanished. True. All the core disciples' eyes lit up. It was only the 10th day since the opening of Saint's tomb. At the moment, genius disciples from various sects probably just started moving towards the inner area, hence Narcissus Island disciples were the only ones there. What happened a while back was naturally known only by Narcissus Island disciples, and no one else. Let's go somewhere else since we have tried out all the trials around, and there is nothing in the abyss for us anymore, said Zhong-Yi. Narcissus Island disciples immediately left the abyss and stopped at a corner of the inner area. After that, it was uneventful as everyone was going about their own businesses. Jian Wushuang sat down on a rock by himself, turning over his palm, and took out a piece of jade slip. The jade slip he took out was the sword Principal Insights left behind by Purple Blood Saint, which he obtained on the 8th trial bridge. Purple Blood Saint was the peak expert among undying saints. He specialized in sword principles, hence his insights were extremely profound. Jian Wushuang really looked forward to looking at the sword principle insights he had left behind. I hope the insights recorded by Purple Blood Saint don't disappoint. After murmuring to himself, Jian Wushuang started browsing through the jade slip's contents. The sword is the leader of all arms, emperor of all weapons. The sword principles are the principles of offense and slaughter. The sword shatters the void on the other shore and witnesses all dimensions. One word of disagreement: unsheath and kill. No surrender, no cowardice, no tolerance. The only part that matters is the will to not look back and not hold back. This is the cultivation of the sword. Only a few simple sentences, but it was enough to instantly make Jian Wushuang's blood boil. There was even an obscure sword essence within Jian Wushuang that was beyond his suppression, ready to take flight. Purple Blood Saint saw the sword essence, sword principles, and even sword cultivation. But he went to the extreme because of that. Jian Wushuang told himself. He indeed went to the extreme. However, to be more accurate, sword cultivation itself was an extremist act. One word of disagreement: unsheath and kill. No surrender, no cowardice, no tolerance. There was only the will of not looking and holding back. That was extreme. However, Jian Wushuang's understanding of sword cultivation was different. A great man, to him, is able to give and take. When it was time not to look back, he would do exactly that. However, when the time came to take a step back, he must do so as well. Only then could one live longer and walk further in this merciless world. As for Purple Blood Saint, he had seen the sword cultivation's essence and truths, but he also understood the way of the world. That was why he died. Hence, becoming an undying saint was his final destination. However, for Jian Wushuang, who was the second perfect chaotic creature in the world, he had his own mission. In addition, he was the only hope of that sealed-off world, so he absolutely could not die. He had to go further and become stronger. Hence, he could not agree with Purple Blood Saint's sword cultivation way. Of course, that was only his personal understanding and perception. Jian Wushuang had no obligation to take it to heart, as every man has his own path. What interested Jian Wushuang was Purple Blood Saint's understanding of sword principles. He continued reading. Jian Wushuang quickly sunk into it. Although Purple Blood Saint's understanding of sword cultivation was rather extreme, his understanding of sword principles was also terrifyingly profound. He had a very detailed explanation of every sword principle realm, the crucial points of every level, the way to break through them, and etc. Sword principles proceeded from insignificance to introductory, merit, profound achievement, and all the way to completion. After that, it was the real sword principle realm. For real sword principle realm, according to Purple Blood Saint, there were 3 major levels. The first level was Sword World. Sword World required a very high level of understanding of sword principles. With the understanding, one could develop his own sword world, which was to develop a world with one's sword principles. As soon as Sword World was completed, one could utilize it to suppress his opponents. Practitioners who were on the same level, if one party had formed his sword world and the other did not, the suppression from the sword world could cut down their opponent's ability by half. If both parties had comprehended sword principles, the party that did not form his sword world would have almost no chance to fight back. However strong his sword skills were, as soon as the sword world suppression began, any sword skill would almost immediately crumble. Sword World was also the symbol of a sword principle expert. A practitioner who was good at sword principles could only be considered a true sword principle expert after he had developed his own sword world. For example, Jian Wushuang, who had achieved the complete sword principle realm but had not yet developed his sword world, could not be considered a sword principle expert. He could only be considered a pretty good sword cultivator. Sword World. Jian Wushuang squinted. He recalled the fight to eliminate the Blood Emperor in his previous life. He fought side by side with Emperor 13, the most terrifying sword cultivator he had encountered. The Emperor displayed one of the forms from his heaven-shaking sword principle. That sword principle was also considered a sword world. However, Emperor 13 was purely performing the masterstroke form, totally different from the sword principle state that Purple Blood Saint had described in his Insights, chapter 2418. Purple Blood Sword Principle Sword World was only the first level of the real sword principle realm. The second level was Infinity Sword Tree. According to Purple Blood Saint's dictation, sword principles would reproduce by itself as soon as the development of Sword World started, nurturing the first living being in the sword world, the Infinity Sword Tree. The sword tree would be at the center of the sword world, which was the core of sword principles. From birth, the sword tree would grow larger and stronger following the sword principles improvement, and would eventually have every corner of the sword world under its shades. Life nurturing? Jian Wushuang was stunned. After that, he read about the third level of the real sword principle realm. The realm's third level was the formation of all things in the sword world, that which happened after the sword world had an independent and sturdy infinity sword tree. The sword principles would then continue evolving into all objects in the sword world. Upon reaching that point, the sword essences could form mountains, oceans, and countless other things. The possibilities were limitless. After browsing through the 3 levels of the real sword principle realm, Jian Wushuang felt a slight shock. Initially developed the sword world, followed by nurturing the first infinity sword tree in the sword world, and finally forming everything in the world. A process such as this seems similar to the normal progress of Earth. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself. The world's evolution also started off with a prototype, then slowly nurturing its first life form and gradually forming the rest of the matter on Earth. Sword principles were essentially the evolution of a world. If I'm right, After the forming of all things, there was still more to look forward to. After all, the real world doesn't stop at just forming all things. Jian Wushuang knew very clearly that sword principles were infinitely profound. Although Purple Blood Saint's understanding of sword principles was extremely high, he was only an undying saint after all, who was not able to completely see through it. Therefore, the 3 levels that he stated were only a part of sword principles. However, it was already incredibly profound and mysterious for Jian Wushuang, even if it was only a part. After all, he was still a distance away from reaching the first level of sword principles, which was to develop the sword world. Although Purple Blood Saint's insights of sword principles were very profound, the fact remains that he was only at the 2nd Infinity Sword tree level himself, Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Purple Blood Saint's own level of real sword principle realm was also mentioned in his insights. Indeed, he was only at the 2nd Infinity Sword tree level. Even within Infinity Sword tree, he had only reached the profound achievement and had yet to enter completion. Even so, he was still a terrifying sword cultivator among the undying saints. According to Purple Blood Saint, there were merely a few undying saints who could achieve the 3rd formation of all things level. If any undying saints reached that stage, he would be dominating above all undying saints. Jian Wushuang continued browsing in the Sword Principles insights. Other than the explanation of Sword Principle realms, the most important information was Purple Blood Saint's understanding towards every single Sword Principle realm, which included a lot of attention-calling details. For example, the way to resolve cultivation bottlenecks and other difficulties. It was a Sword Principles guidebook. It would help Jian Wushuang avoid straying away from the right path. Jian Wushuang spent half a day reading through the insights before finally putting it away. He gave a light exhale and raised his head with joyfulness shining in his eyes. That truly was the sword cultivation of a saint realm. Even though he did not leave behind much insight on the 3rd formation of all things level, nevertheless he went into extreme details on Sword World and Infinity Sword tree development. With these insights at hand, it would help me steer clear from a lot of issues when I enter the 3rd Sword Principles level, especially regarding the Sword World. Previously, even if I knew that developing Sword World was the 1st Sword Principles level, I wouldn't even know how to begin, but I do now. Jian Wushuang smiled. The Sword Principle Insights was indeed immensely helpful to him. After carefully reading through it once, Jian Wushuang temporarily kept it in his interspatial ring before taking out another jade slip. That jade slip was certainly the one that had the Purple Blood Sword Principle dictated in it. Purple Blood Sword Principle is the most powerful sword principle Purple Blood Saint created. It's also one of his possessions which allowed him to travel within the ancient god domain. I really want to check out this sword principle and see what is so special about it. Jian Wushuang was similarly looking forward to it. Hence, he started investigating in detail. Purple Blood Saint had a very extreme understanding of sword cultivation. His Purple Blood Sword Principle was also an incredibly extreme set of sword principles. That sword principle only emphasized on one aspect, which was speed. Absolute speed. Purple Blood Sword Principle had a total of 21 sword forms, which were all very lively forms, rapid and yet unpredictable. What really shocked Jian Wushuang was that none of those forms involved highly offensive moves such as furious chops or straight cuts. It's a sword principle that purely brings speed to an extreme level. This Purple Blood Saint, Jian Wushuang, was in awe. After that, he began to study the many sword forms in Purple Blood Sword Principle. 21 sword forms. The first form, Falling Snow. The second form, Demon Shadow. The third form, Purple Light Phantom. The fourth form, Blood Demon. Every sword form had a strong emphasis on speed. Coincidentally, Jian Wushuang had already achieved full comprehension of space-time laws, making him extremely good at speed. At that point, Purple Blood Sword Principle worked as a very good reference for him. Through studying it, and in addition to his immense sword principles understanding improvement, he could now absolutely invent his second form of the time-space sword principle. Jian Wushuang cross-legged and sat there, completely sinking in his studying of the Purple Blood Sword principle. Time quickly flew by. While Jian Wushuang was deep into his studies of the Purple Blood Sword principle, the genius disciples from various sects who were still in the outer area of Saint's tomb gradually arrived at the inner area. They reached the trial abysses, where those 9 opportunities were at. However, upon arrival, they immediately noticed one of the missing trial bridges. What happened? Didn't Saint's tomb have 9 opportunities? Since it's so, there should have been 9 trial bridges. Why are there only 8 of them? There were surely 9 opportunities. Clearly, the reason one of them is missing was that someone had passed through it. It was barely more than 10 days after Saint's tomb was opened. Genius disciples from different sects should have only arrived at the inner area not long ago. Who was so fast to pass through a trial? Go check which trial bridge is missing. The genius disciples from different sects started investigating. They soon realized that the missing trial bridge was the 8th trial bridge, which was the bridge where Purple Blood Saint left his sword principle insights and Purple Blood Sword principle behind. Chapter 24:19. Dissatisfied, the 8th trial bridge that required passing a total of 81 test floors was broken through by someone. The sword principle's insights and Purple Blood Sword principle left behind by Purple Blood Saint had been obtained. In Saint's tomb, the news took the genius disciples from various sects by storm. One had to realize that there were only 16 levels of trials in Saint's tomb in the beginning, and it got harder by the level. Ever since the discovery of Saint's tomb, it had opened many times, and only 7 trials had been broken through. Every time a trial was broken through in the abyss, it would cause a stir. The current situation was not an exception either. Furthermore, it was the 8th trial bridge that was broken through. Everyone knew that among the various trials in Saint's tomb, the 8th trial bridge was definitely one of the hardest to be broken through. Among the 81 test floors, the best result previously set by a person was breaking through 73 floors. It was because of that people were more shocked when the news had gotten out. At the same time, they were all curious. Who could that be? Who broke through the 8th trial bridge? No idea. The 8th trial bridge had already disappeared when we came. Saint's tomb has barely been open for more than 10 days. Isn't this person a bit too fast? Really, who is it? All the genius disciples wanted to know who had passed the trial, but nobody had a clue. After all, only Narcissus Island disciples knew about Jian Wushuang breaking through the 8th trial bridge. As long as they kept quiet, it would be difficult for others to find out. However, there were people who tried to find out the person who passed the trial despite the difficulty by using all kinds of methods. Most of those people were swordsmanship geniuses. The sword had always been one of the most commonly seen weapons in the world. Those who entered Saint's tomb were genius disciples from different sects, and quite a lot of them had swords as their main weapon. Most of those genius disciples had all previously received information that among the opportunities offered in Saint's tomb, one of them was dedicated to sword principles. Many people were after the sword principle trial and looking forward to trying it out. However, somebody had already obtained the sword principle opportunity way ahead of them when they had just stepped into the inner area, causing them not to have the chance to try out the 8th trial bridge. How were they willing to accept such a fact? They naturally wanted to expose the person who had taken the opportunity. Among those people, the most fanatical one was Pang Tao. Pang Tao was the 6th 12 minor kings, hailing from the Great Compassion sect. The 12 minor kings were widely recognized as the top 12 geniuses in Wuxia wilderness. The fact that Pang Tao could be named sixth among them showed his exceptional qualities. Other than that, Pang Tao was a sword cultivator. None of those from the 12 minor kings above his ranking were good at sword principles. This also meant that he could be considered the number one sword cultivator among the younger generation in Wuxia wilderness. He should have been the most hopeful candidate to break through the 8th trial bridge, since he was the number one sword cultivator among the many younger generation genius disciples who had entered Saint's tomb. Pang Tao himself also entered the tomb due to the 8th trial bridge. He had set himself on obtaining purple blood saints cultivation insights and purple blood sword principle. However, in the end, Pang Tao's face flushed up with blood while standing on the edge of the trial abyss and looking at where the 8th trial bridge should have been. His eyes were terrifyingly grim. He was truly furious at that moment. How he had longed for the opportunity that came with the 8th trial bridge. However, at the same time, he understood perfectly how difficult it was to break through the trial on the 8th trial bridge. No sword geniuses had ever broken through the trial before. Not even he felt absolutely confident about it, let alone the others. Hence, he was not hasty about it. Like the other disciples, he stayed in the outer area for 10 days and collected some purple tokens before rushing into the inner area. He thought that, since the trial bridge was there, the sword principle insights, and the purple blood sword principle left behind by purple blood saint would be there waiting patiently for him to take up the trial as well. He was not in the slightest hurry. However, he did not expect that the bridge had already been broken through when he arrived. He, the number one young sword cultivator, had not taken up the trial, but the trial bridge was already gone. He could not accept it. Pang Tao felt incredibly unwilling to accept it. All the unwillingness had turned into a surging wave of anger. Investigate it. Pang Tao growled like a furious beast. There was another core disciple from the Great Compassion sect whose heart skipped a bear when he saw Pang Tao's expression and immediately went to investigate. I truly want to see who has such skills to break through the test on the 8th trial bridge in such a short time. Pang Tao clenched his fists tight. His nails sunk into his flesh, causing some blood to stream out. Those who simultaneously went to investigate included quite a number of geniuses who were gifted in swordsmanship. However, nobody saw what happened at the trial bridge with their own eyes. And since there were many genius disciples who entered the tomb, to find such a genius disciple who was gifted in swordsmanship and had broken through the trial was not easy. 3 days swiftly passed. Most people gave up after not finding a clue within the past 3 days. Only Pang Tao was still feeling extremely dissatisfied. So any result? Pang Tao was staring at the Great Compassion sect core disciple in front of him with his bloodshot eyes. The core disciple took a deep breath and solemnly said, "Senior brother Pang Tao, I have tried every investigation method, but I still couldn't discover who had broken through the test on the 8th trial bridge. I have also checked out the sword geniuses who had exceptional swordsmanship and would be able to pass the trial, but still couldn't find any leads. Which means that person who passed the trial isn't someone we are aware of. It's probably someone insignificant and has no fame." Pang Tao frowned. "Exactly, which made our investigation even harder," said the core disciple. "Humph, the 8th trial bridge is so hard to pass. Even a genius who could defy the heavens would have to take quite a few days to break through. We were among the ones who arrived here quite early, and yet when we got here, the 8th trial bridge had already disappeared. That means the person who had broken through the trial got to the inner area even earlier," said Pang Tao softly. "Start by investigating the order of people's arrival. Find out which sect arrived at the inner area first, or rather, who arrived at the inner area first. Let's figure out which sects that came here The earliest, then we can begin filtering from there on. Chapter 24:20. Found him the core, disciple quickly went back to his investigation. Investigating the few sects that arrived first at the inner area was so much easier than simply investigating who passed the trial. The core, disciple, once again appeared in front of Pang Tao after only half a day. The core disciple said, "Senior brother Pang Tao, I have the results. Among the numerous sects from Wuxia Wilderness, 3 sects that first arrived at the inner area were Demonic Moon Sect, Heavenly Feather Sect, and Narcissus Island. They were the ones who arrived at the earliest. As for who among them arrived first, it's undetermined." Just these 3. Pang Tao squinted. Of these 3, Heavenly Feather Sect could be immediately ruled out. After all, they are a weak sect, and there are only 3 disciples listed to enter Saint's Tomb. I received accurate intelligence that none of their 3 disciples are gifted in swordsmanship, said the core disciple. Aha! Pang Tao nodded slightly. The 8th trial bridge was a test specifically designed for swordsmanship. If they did not even have a disciple who was good at it, Heavenly Feather Sect would naturally not have anyone who could pass the trial. But the Demonic Moon Sect is a big sect. There are 8 disciples who came into Saint's Tomb. Moreover, there are 2 among the 8 of them who are good at swords. I have information about these 2 people as well. One of them is the Demonic Moon Sect's number 1 genius, Yao Xian. As for the second one, he is only a normal talented disciple. Although he is a second-class divine demon, his sword principle understanding is rather low. I heard he is only at merit in sword principles, and his sword skills are also quite mediocre. Probably not the person who could pass the test at the 8th trial bridge, said the core disciple. Humph, merit in sword principles? Of course he can't pass. Even Yao Huan, who is the number 1 genius of the Demonic Moon Sect, can't pass the trial, let alone him. Pang Tao sneered in disdain. He knew about Yao Huan, and they even crossed hands before. At that time, he was fighting against Yao Huan, who was collaborating with 2 other first-class divine demons. Even when fighting 3 of them all together, Pang Tao still crushed them. In terms of swordsmanship, Yao Huan could only be considered as good. However, it would be a fantasy if he wanted to break through the sword principles trial on the 8th trial bridge. Narcissus Island is the only one left since we have ruled out those 2 sections. Narcissus Island is qualified to be one of the top 10 grand sects in Wuxia Wilderness. Is there anyone who is good at swords and has a really high comprehensive ability towards sword principles among their disciples? Pang Tao asked. However, the core disciple frowned upon that question. Senior brother Pang Tao, according to my intelligence, Yao Huan from Demonic Moon Sect is the only one possible to pass the trial bridges challenge among all 3 sections. There shouldn't be anyone else. As for Narcissus Island, they have 10 disciples who entered Saint's Tomb like before, but there's only one who is good at swords, and most importantly, that person is merely in the chaotic realm. Pang Tao was slightly surprised. Chaotic realm? You're saying that among the 10 Narcissus Island disciples, there is a person in the chaotic realm who is good at swords? Correct. But it's impossible for a person in chaotic realm to break through the challenge on the 8th trial bridge, said the core disciple. Impossible? How do you know it's impossible? Do you know his level of understanding of sword principles? Pang Tao looked over. Well, I actually don't know, but his realm. Before he could finish, Pang Tao cut him off and said, being in his current cultivation does mean that his abilities are weak. However, the tests in the trial abyss do not emphasize on your cultivation level. Pang Tao paused when he reached that part of the sentence, his eyes glowing with an odd expression. Chaotic realm. A chaotic realm person from Narcissus Island. Wouldn't he be? Pang Tao's face changed as he suddenly recalled someone. Do you have any information about that chaotic realm guy? For example, his real name or his status on Narcissus Island? Asked Pang Tao immediately. That isn't clear for now, but I can go ask, said the core disciple. Go ask immediately. Pang Tao pushed him. The core disciple held a token in his hand and immediately sent a message to the Great Compassion Sect's intelligence department outside. The Great Compassion Sect was the top sect in Wuxia Wilderness. Having a foundation generations old, their intelligence gathering ability was also the strongest in Wuxia Wilderness. They had been keeping a close eye on grand sects like Narcissus Island, sects that are qualified to be in the top 10 list. If an incredible genius came out of Narcissus Island, the Great Compassion Sect would know everything about him. They even have detailed information about each core disciple from Narcissus Island. Though the Great Compassion Sect did not show much interest toward the outer disciples. However, due to Elder Wujian, Jian Wushuang was a rather special Narcissus Island outer disciple, hence the Great Compassion Sect had taken note of him. Besides, there were already instructions from the superiors in the Great Compassion Sect early on to keep a close eye on him. Hence, they found his information with just a slight search. The core disciple looked over at Pang Tao. Senior brother Pang Tao, I've found him. The chaotic realm disciple from Narcissus Island who entered Saint's tomb this time is called Jian Wushuang. According to what we know, he is only an outer disciple. There is an elder on Narcissus Island who looks highly upon him. It's due to this elder that he could enter the tomb. Jian Wushuang, Jian Wushuang. Pang Tao recited his name repeatedly. The glow in his eyes became extremely sharp. Indeed, it's him. It's this Jian Wushuang. Senior brother Pang Tao, you're saying that the guy who passed the 8th trial bridge is this Jian Wushuang? How is that possible? The core disciple was in slight disbelief. A mere chaotic realm disciple, who was only an outer disciple, an absolutely insignificant person, and he passed the challenge that countless swordsmanship geniuses failed to break through? Humph, I can't guarantee if it's some other people, but if it's him, I can be sure that he is the one who passed the challenge on the 8th trial bridge. After all, this Jian Wushuang had almost become my master's second personal disciple, said Pang Tao coldly. The core disciple was completely dumbfounded upon hearing that. Did Pang Tao just mention his master? Who was his master? He was one of the grand elders of the Great Compassion Sect, and the widely renowned #1 sword cultivator in Wuxia Wilderness at the same time, Fan Jianxian. That Jian Wushuang almost became Fan Jiangxian's personal disciple. How was that possible? Besides, if he was that capable, why was he only an outer disciple on Narcissus Island? Regardless of how doubtful the core disciple was, Pang Tao had decided it was him. Jian Wushuang, I've heard so much about you from Master early on. I didn't expect you to show up in Saint's tomb and pass the challenge on the 8th trial bridge, murmured Pang Tao with his eyes glowing frostily. Chapter 24-21. Pang Tao's visit. Where is Jian Wushuang? Asked Pang Tao. He has always stayed with Narcissus Island disciples, and they are inside, said the core disciple. Very well. Take me to him, said Pang Tao coldly. Brother Pang Tao, do you want to meet and greet the other 2 seniors first? Asked the core disciple curiously. The Great Compassion Sect was the top sect. They sent 30 disciples into the saint's tomb, which were divided into 3 teams. Pang Tao led a team, and the other 2 teams were also led by 2 other members of the 12 minor kings. There were only 10 people in a single team, which was similar to the team from Narcissus Island. It's just a small matter. Let's not bother them both. Come on. Pang Tao waved his hand. Pang Tao and the 9 Great Compassion Sect disciples in his team immediately set out towards Jian Wushuang. At that very moment, the inner area was crowded with talented disciples from various sects who gathered there. Most of the disciples were at the abyss of trial, attempting to cross those trial bridges. Although there were only 8 trial bridges left, each trial bridge could house multiple people at the same time. Therefore, those disciples did not need to queue up. Many disciples who turned up earlier had already tried those trial bridges one after another, but none were successful. Those sect disciples who have been tested did not loiter around the abyss of trials. Instead, they were scattered at every corner of the inner area. The 10 disciples from Narcissus Island were also gathered somewhere in a corner. Jian Wushuang was still studying alone the purple blood sword principle, while the other 9 disciples gathered in small groups and chatted casually. Junior Wushuang is neither conceited nor rash. Many genius disciples that are good at swordsmanship are looking for him, but he was not worried at all. He just sits there studying all by himself. What is there to worry about? No one but us knows that he passed the 8 trial bridges test. As long as we don't let out tongue slip, no one will come after him. To be honest, I've never thought so highly of junior brother Wushuang before. It seems that although he has a lower realm, he is talented. That's for sure. How can he be just an ordinary person if he could pass the 8th trial bridge, which so many sword principle geniuses failed? Those Narcissus Island Corps disciples had a huge change of attitude towards Jian Wushuang during the conversation. Even though Jian Wushuang had never shown them his real strength and powers, he had won their respect by passing through the 8th trial bridges test. Those Corps disciples were not stupid either. They knew that luck alone would not bring Jian Wushuang his success, but rather his outstanding sword skills. Furthermore, even if Jian Wushuang overcame the trials by luck, he bagged the opportunities that came with it. After his return to Narcissus Island, the higher-ups of Narcissus Island would notice his potential and make him one of the core disciples. All core disciples, and they were of equal status. No one would be looking down on each other. Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and Wei Qing stood together in a clearing. Junior brother Wei Qing, how is your injury recovering? Asked Zhong Yi. Not bad. Although there's still a long way to return to my peak, I can handle a fight, answered Wei Qing. Zhong Yi smiled. That's good. Now that there is no need to collect purple amulets, and each of us has also attempted the trial bridges tests, we will just wait patiently for Fengtian Scroll's 6 observation seats to appear one by one. We shall try our best to fight for a seat if there's a chance. Su Tong and Wei Qing both nodded their heads. Neither the purple amulets, which allowed its owners to enter the divine power ocean, nor the opportunities that came along with the tests appeared as the most tempting opportunity of Saint's Tomb. After all, the most fascinating thing was the 6 seats to observe Fengtian Scroll and be enlightened in the process. That was the greatest opportunity. The tomb was opened so many times, and every time the 6 seats appeared, a bloody storm was to be expected. Talented disciples who finally got those 6 seats saw a great improvement in their strength after they got a look at the Fengtian Scroll. Progress in power and cultivation were what all disciples were after. Among the trio of Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and Wei Qing was a second-class divine demon who knew very well that he was unable to contest for a seat. On the other hand, Zhong Yi and Su Tong were both extremely powerful first-class divine demons and had a strong desire for those 6 seats. By the way, senior brother Zhong, shall we send a message to the elders that junior brother Wushuang had passed the 8th trial bridge? Asked Su Tong suddenly. Shall we tell the elders? Zhong Yi pondered for a moment and then shook his head. No, we are not in a hurry to do that. Anyway, we are all safe now. There is no need to report this to the elders. Let's wait till we return safely to Narcissus Island before bringing that up. Well, I think so too. Su Tong also nodded. But at that moment, swoosh, 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 Swoosh! In the void some distance away, a total of 10 black spots zoomed in at an astonishing speed. Those 10 black shadows were not only fast, but also amazingly powerful. Their presence stirred up a commotion. Many sect disciples were startled along the way. They are from the Great Compassion sect. Yes, they are from the Great Compassion sect. Their leader is Pang Tao, who is ranked 6th among the 12 minor kings. Pang Tao looks aggressive. I wonder who has offended him. Who knows? Pang Tao is the top sword cultivator among the younger generation in the Wuxia wilderness. His master, Fan Jianxian, was even more famous. He went into the tomb aiming for the 8th trial bridges test, but the bridge was crossed, and as a result, its opportunity was claimed. He was annoyed when he found out about it. Had he managed to find the person who crossed the 8th trial bridge? Let's go along and have a look. Many sect disciples arrived with Pang Tao and his team members. In the blink of an eye, Pang Tao and his team members appeared in front of Narcissus Island disciples. The 10 disciples of Narcissus Island stood up one after another and looked over at Pang Tao and his members. The only exception was Jian Wushuang, who was still quietly studying. Zhong Yi's and Su Tong's expressions sank as they looked at those incoming people. Pang Tao and everyone from the Great Compassion sect, what brought you here? Zhong Yi stepped forward and asked. As the top genius of Narcissus Island, although he could not match Pang Tao, he should at least remain calm before Pang Tao. On the contrary, the other disciples of Narcissus Island were in awe when facing Pang Tao. Chapter 24-22. Extremely sure, one's reputation grows correlatively to the shadow of the tree. One, the name of the 12 minor kings was incomparable to ordinary geniuses. Are you Zhong Yi? Pang Tao glanced at Zhong Yi. I've heard about you. Among the younger disciples of Wuxia wilderness, apart from the 12 minor kings, there are also a few more capable cultivators. You are one of them, but it's a pity that I am not here to see you today. In that case, who are you looking for? Zhong Yi stared at Pang Tao alertly. Pang Tao grinned evilly as his eyes swept across the other Narcissus Island disciples, observing them one at a time. All the disciples who met his gaze lowered their heads, and no one dared to look directly at Pang Tao. These Narcissus Island core disciples were self-acclaimed geniuses. They were indeed talented to a certain extent. However, many geniuses had gathered in the saint's tomb. Their powers were a far cry compared to Pang Tao from the Great Compassion sect, who ranked 6th among the 12 minor kings. Pang Tao could not be bothered about those disciples either. He looked around and finally locked his eyes on Jian Wushuang, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. He is the one I'm looking for. Pang Tao pointed directly at Jian Wushuang. His gaze became extremely sharp, and his aura completely enshrouded Jian Wushuang. The Narcissus Island disciples, including Zhong Yi, were startled to see Pang Tao pointing towards Jian Wushuang. Has Pang Tao already known that junior brother Wushuang broke through the 8th trial bridge? That cannot be. We didn't spread the news, and no one saw junior brother Wushuang completed the test besides us. How did he find out? Zhong Yi frowned. At that moment, Jian Wushuang, who was enveloped in Pang Tao's aura, recovered his attention. He opened his eyes and slowly stood up. Under the overbearing aura pressure of Pang Tao's first-class divine demon, Jian Wushuang remained calm and expressionless. He turned his head to look at Pang Tao and smiled faintly. You must be a friend from the Great Compassion sect, Brother Pang Tao, who is ranked 6th among the 12 minor kings, right? I wonder why you are looking for me? Jian Wushuang sounded polite. He even addressed Pang Tao humbly as a senior brother, though they were from different sections. Senior brother? You really know how to cotton up to me. You must be Jian Wushuang. I know you. Pang Tao stared at Jian Wushuang. It's an honor to be known by senior brother Pang Tao. Jian Wushuang was still acting humbly. Jian Wushuang, I won't waste time talking nonsense with you. I know that you are the one who passed the test of the 8th trial bridge. The Purple Blood Saint's inheritance is now in your hands. I will leave now, as long as you hand over the Purple Blood Saint's inheritance to me. Otherwise, Pang Tao's voice was cold. His words immediately sent the surrounding void into chaos. There were quite a number of talented disciples from various sects surrounding him. Previously, those disciples had no idea what Pang Tao wanted to do with Jian Wushuang, but they now realized his intention. Pang Tao was there for the Purple Blood Saint's inheritance. They were puzzled as Jian Wushuang did not look like someone who was able to complete the test on the 8th trial bridge. If I'm not mistaken, isn't Jian Wushuang just a chaotic realm? Yes, he is a chaotic realm. I noticed him when I was in the outer areas of Saint's tomb. The weakest genius of all the sects this time who entered the tomb was at least a second-class divine demon. He is the only one in the chaotic realm. Did Pang Tao just say that this chaotic realm passed the test of the 8th trial bridge? Are you kidding me? I don't think it is possible. He is just a chaotic realm anyway. Even if he is highly talented, he could not possibly have a good sword principles understanding. How could he possibly pass the trial bridge, which countless sword skill geniuses failed to pass? Moreover, I've never heard of Jian Wushuang. I would never believe that an unknown chaotic realm had just passed the test. Everyone around was busy gossiping about what they saw. It turned out that 99%, or perhaps 100% of them, did not believe that Jian Wushuang passed the test. Some people even thought that Pang Tao was probably looking for trouble with Narcissus Island, so he deliberately made the claim. Unlike the genius disciples of various sects, Narcissus Island core disciples trembled when they heard what Pang Tao said. They did not expect that Pang Tao would turn up and insist that Jian Wushuang was the person who had crossed the 8th trial bridge despite no one spreading the news. Where did he get the news? Why was he so sure? Pang Tao, what are you talking about? Which trial bridge's test? Did you say that the test of the 8th trial bridge that has stumped countless sword skill geniuses in Wuxia Wilderness was passed by junior brother Wushuang? Zhong Yi was calm and even sarcastically smiled. The test of the 8th trial bridge is extremely tough. My junior brother Wushuang is indeed gifted with the sword, but he is only a chaotic realm. I might as well tell you that he is just an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. He is particularly close to Elder Wujian. Hence, Elder Wujian sent him along with us to this tomb so that he can gain knowledge. Isn't it funny if you claim that he is the one who passed the test of the 8th trial bridge? Haha, Pang Tao, what wild assumptions you have. Zhong Yi did not hide his sneer. The genius disciples of various sects around gave Pang Tao the derisive look. Obviously, no one believed Pang Tao's claim. It was unreasonable for a chaotic realm and a Narcissus Island outer disciple to have passed the challenging test. Jian Wushuang made his way to Zhong Yi's side, but he remained expressionless. Pang Tao stared down at Jian Wushuang and suddenly grinned. Huh, did I really just make a wild guess? Or is it true? Jian Wushuang, don't think that you can hide away just because you are only a chaotic realm and an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. Indeed, no one from the other sects will ever doubt that it was you. That's why no one was able to hunt you down after so many days. But indifferent. Jian Wushuang, I've heard of you a long time ago. I know who you are. Don't forget that I'm not merely the great Compassion Sect core disciple. Most importantly, I have a master, and he's the top sword cultivator of the Wuxia Wilderness, Fan Jianxian. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He was helpless. He finally knew why Pang Tao was extremely sure that he was the one who passed the test. Chapter 24-23. Everything about Jian Wushuang. 1. The others were even more confused than before, but Jian Wushuang could understand the implicit meaning Pang Tao was putting across. The genius disciples of various sects present at the scene wore strange expressions. They did not know why Pang Tao made the comment or even mentioned his master, Fan Jianxian. Pang Tao, what exactly do you want to say? Zhong Yi squinted his eyes slightly and stared at Pang Tao. Could it be that you, the top genius of Narcissus Island and senior brother to Jian Wushuang, knew nothing about your junior brother? Pang Tao sneered. He then waved to someone by his side. A core disciple of the Great Compassion sect immediately stepped forward and handed him a jade slip. Pang Tao took the jade slip and gave Jian Wushuang a deep stare before reading out loudly. Jian Wushuang, born 21 years ago in Blazing Moon City, Anzhou Commandery. A divine sword came falling from the sky when he was born. A mysterious expert in Anzhou Commandery, Taoist Xian Shun, named him Jian Wushuang, which means a man with indomitable sword skills. Many of the talented disciples present were shocked to hear the very first statement. Did he say 21 years ago? Jian Wushuang was born 21 years ago. So, he's only 21 years old this year, but his cultivation level, he is at the peak of the chaotic realm. A 21-year-old peak chaotic realm? Oh dear, that sounds impossible, right? How can he progress with such cultivation speed? Exclaimed someone. It was daunting to hear about a 21-year-old who had achieved peak chaotic realm. No one had ever taken Jian Wushuang seriously before that. It was mainly because of his low cultivation level. He had not even made it into the divine demon realm. However, they had completely changed their minds after hearing about his age. Jian Wushuang was too young. Those divine demon realm disciples, especially those who were geniuses, had spent almost 100 years or even hundreds of years to get to where they were. Yet, Jian Wushuang had achieved peak chaotic realm at the tender age of 21. It would not be long before he caught up with them. As for the divine sword which Pang Tao mentioned to have descended from the sky and inspired Jian Wushuang's name sounded improbable, so no one gave it much attention. Pang Tao momentarily paused before continuing to recite the information about Jian Wushuang from the jade slip. Jian Wushuang, you were unknown from the age of 1 to 16 and did not show much of a skill until you were 16. When you were only 16, you claimed an instant victory after shattering the weapon of Zhuge, a core disciple from Left Heaven sect, with just one strike of your sword. At that time, your cultivation level was only at pure yang realm, but your sword principle understanding had achieved profound sword principle realm. What? It's impossible. The genius disciples around were shocked. How could he have achieved profound sword principle realm at the age of 16? That must have been a joke. There were many second-class divine demons, and even some first-class divine demons who spent years in sword skill cultivation, yet they were nowhere near the profound sword principle realm. A 16-year-old young man in pure yang realm could not have made such progress even if he had started cultivation when he was in his mother's womb. Pang Tao ignored the reactions of those people around him and continued to read from the jade slip. At the age of 19, something happened at the Lin mansion. You helped the Lin family because of your father. At that time, you just stepped into the chaotic realm. Despite that, you had relentlessly killed 2 third-class divine demons in the war and resolved the Lin family's crisis in one fell swoop. Those genius disciples around were flabbergasted. There was no way what Pang Tao said was true. He killed 2 third-class divine demons at the early stage of the chaotic realm. How could that be? It was already inconceivable that someone could kill a third-class divine demon at the peak of the chaotic realm. Many of them shook their heads in denial after hearing what Pang Tao said. Not true. That can't be right. I don't know where Pang Tao got that information, but it sounds bizarre. Everyone was doubtful about the information Pang Tao had produced. Pang Tao continued. Only 3 months after you resolved the crisis for the Lin family, 2 great second-class divine demons of Gold Cauldron sect, Xiang Yi and Qian Yuan, and 4 third-class divine demons seek you out to avenge for an elder of the Xiang clan who died. You sweep all of them out in the battle again and behead 3 Gold Cauldron sect's third-class divine demons. You even defeated both Xiang Yi and Qian Yuan, who were second-class divine demons. Everyone shook their heads. They were certain that the information was misleading. If there was a slim chance for Jian Wushuang to have killed third-class divine demons in the early stages of the chaotic realm, it was downright impossible for him to have defeated second-class divine demons. After reading the statements, Pang Tao finally lowered the jade slip in his hand. He looked quizzically at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, I found this information about you from the Great Compassion sect. I must say it sounds pretty interesting. It's indeed rather interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, but he kept his straight face. To be honest, I was shocked when I first saw this information. Many statements sounded unbelievable to me. Although this information came from the Great Compassion sect's intelligence network, I have my doubts about it. Let's just verify its authenticity since I met you here, said Pang Tao. How would you like to verify it? Jian Wushuang asked. It's very simple. A few disciples from Gold Cauldron sect have entered the tomb. Qian Yuan, who has fought with you, is one of them. He is just somewhere around the corner. Let's get him to testify about it. Pang Tao shot his eyes to his side while he was making the suggestion. Many disciples also looked in the same direction. That was where the Gold Cauldron sect disciples gathered. A total of 6 disciples from the Gold Cauldron sect came, and Qian Yuan was one of the 6 disciples. Qian Yuan clearly heard what Pang Tao said earlier, but he said nothing. Under everyone's scrutiny, Qian Yuan stood up and solemnly said, I don't like to admit it, but what Pang Tao said just now is indeed true. Back then when we were in front of Lin Mansion in Anzhou Commandery, Jian Wushuang was at the early stage of the chaotic realm. However, he had the powers of a second-class divine demon. Junior brother Xiang Yi and I joined forces in the battle, and although we were not defeated, junior brother Xiang Yi and I were at a disadvantage. Qian Yuan made a public acknowledgement. The many talented disciples who determined that the information was false were all taken aback. So it's true. Jian Wushuang has subdued second-class divine demons in his early stage of chaotic realm. How is that possible? Pang Tao received that information from the Great Compassion sect, and their intelligence network rarely made a mistake. Nonetheless, that was some shocking truth. Chapter 24:24. Everything about Jian Wushuang. Too shocking. Yes, it indeed shocked the world. It was Jian Wushuang's formidable record that took the world by surprise. It was simply unbelievable. It sounded so blatantly implausible that everyone thought the information was embellished. However, that information was a fact. Monster! Countless people turned their heads to look at Jian Wushuang. Even several other Narcissus Island disciples, including Zhong Yi and Su Tong, stared at Jian Wushuang in stupefaction. They knew that Jian Wushuang must be gifted in sword principle to be able to pass the 8th trial bridges test, but they had never thought that he would have such an incredible past before entering Narcissus Island. Profound sword principle realm at 16 years old. He suppressed 2 great second-class divine demons and slew third-class divine demons at merely 19 years old. How could a monster such as this appeared in the Wuxia wilderness. What blew their minds was that such a monster was their junior brother, who was only an outer disciple in Narcissus Island. If such a monster was only an outer disciple, what more could core disciples like them boast? It seems like this information is true. Pang Tao could not help but glance at Jian Wushuang with a strange luster gleaming in his eyes. He had to admit that Jian Wushuang's record was invincible. His name being called Jian Wushuang was not in vain one. His sword skills were indeed peerless. Jian Wushuang, according to the information collected by Great Compassion Sect, both Elder Wujian of Narcissus Island and Baiyu from Anzhou Commandery County had reached out to you after the battle. Pang Tao continued saying, well, Narcissus Island must have given you the best offer to join them. Baiyu had contacted the Great Compassion Sect on your behalf, and you were also offered to join the Great Compassion Sect as a core disciple. Baiyu had also spoken to my master about your talent in sword skills, and my master intended to recruit you as his personal disciple, but you turned him down. You refused Baiyu's invitation, refused to join the Great Compassion Sect, and refused the opportunity to become my master's personal disciple. Instead, you accepted the invitation from Narcissus Island. What's even funnier is that you chose only to be an outer disciple in Narcissus Island. Jian Wushuang, I really don't know what you were thinking. Pang Tao did not hide his mockery tone. His statements had once again sent the crowd into tumult. He refused the invitation to join the Great Compassion Sect and the opportunity to become a personal disciple of Fan Jianxian. It was inconceivable. The Great Compassion Sect was recognized as the top sect in Wuxia Wilderness. Not only was the Great Compassion Sect the strongest in both powers and foundations, but they also had the most and best talented disciples. The 12 minor kings were a proven fact of their success. The Great Compassion Sect took up 4 out of 12 seats of the 12 minor kings. They were the young blood of Wuxia Wilderness. Many geniuses desired to be part of the Great Compassion Sect. Many young cultivators were eager to join the Great Compassion Sect, but they were not given the opportunity. Fan Jianxian, one of the 3 great grand elders of the Great Compassion Sect, and an ultimate god realm super expert, were recognized as the top sword cultivator in Wuxia Wilderness. If one could be his personal disciple, it was tantamount to reaching the sky in a single bound. If one could be the personal disciple of a super expert like Fan Jianxian, with both parties willing to religiously teach and learn, it was almost guaranteed that even a slightly talented person would become one of the 12 minor kings in the future. There was also a possibility that one could advance into the ultimate god realm. Nevertheless, Jian Wushuang refused such a rare opportunity. He rejected such a golden opportunity. Why did he reject it? Many disciples around were staring at Jian Wushuang with deep jealousy flashed in their eyes. Of course, several reasonable disciples were more understanding. He could rival second-class divine demons in the early-stage chaotic realm. I believe only such a peerless monster dared to bluntly reject Fan Jianxian. Yes, such a monster is no longer limiting his horizon within Wuxia Wilderness. He must have a greater vision. Although Fan Jianxian is capable, it's not guaranteed if he was qualified to accept such a peerless monster as his personal disciple. If I had talents like Jian Wushuang, I would also not go for Fan Jianxian. I would probably find an opportunity to be a disciple of a more powerful master, perhaps a saint. There was a lot of discussion going on, and each disciple had their point of view. Jian Wushuang, who was under everyone's scrutiny and the topic of discussion, did not change his expression at all. It seemed as though he had nothing to do with Pang Tao's claim and the heated discussion regarding him. Once again, Pang Tao stared at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, The reason I've said so much is to address your talent in understanding the sword principle. You are indeed an incredible sword principle genius, a genius who is not confined by your realm. Among all those disciples who are good at sword skills and have entered the tomb, you are the one most likely to pass the 8th trial bridges test beside me. Hence, I immediately came for you when I learned that Narcissus Island is among the first 3 sects who entered the inner area and had confirmed your identity. I'm sure that you must be the one who passed the test of the 8 trial bridge. The Purple Blood Saint's inheritance is definitely in your hands now. Pang Tao said resolutely and full of confidence. The surrounding disciples all looked at Jian Wushuang. They had never heard of Jian Wushuang before. They did not think that Jian Wushuang could pass the 8th trial bridges test when they noticed that he was just a chaotic realm. So they were skeptical of Pang Tao's statements. They had since changed their viewpoints after knowing Jian Wushuang's true details and his incredible past deeds. The test of the 8th trial bridge was extremely difficult. Perhaps only an incredible monster like Jian Wushuang could pass the test. On Narcissus Island's side, Zhong, Yi, and Su Tong were exchanging looks. They came forward to defend Jian Wushuang earlier, but it was useless for them to persist after Jian Wushuang's information was exposed. Many disciples were convinced that Jian Wushuang had passed the test. Moreover, Pang Tao had also confirmed the matter. Hence, it's useless for them to continue denying it. Finally, Jian Wushuang raised his head as a smile crept onto his face. You are right. I've passed the test of the 8th trial bridge. Chapter 24-25. Why do you deserve it? He admitted it. He admitted. Exclaimed those people around suddenly. Jian Wushuang admitted that he had passed the 8th trial bridges test before many genius disciples. It really is you. Pang Tao's face flushed red. Jian Wushuang flipped his hands and took out 2 jade slips. These 2 jade slips are the items I obtained after crossing the 8th trial bridge. The first jade slip is Purple Blood Saint's insights on sword principle, while the second jade slip is the Purple Blood Sword skill, which was self-invented by Purple Blood Saint. I have all of it here, but why should I give you these 2 jade slips? What makes you think you deserve it? What makes you think you deserve it? These simple 7 words made everyone around him stagnate. So what if Jian Wushuang had admitted to it? He won the 2 jade slips through testifying his strength, so he was the rightful owner. Why should he give it away to Pang Tao for nothing? Humph, these 2 jade slips belong to me. These 2 jade slips are the reason I came into Saint's tomb, and I have absolute confidence that I can pass the test of the 8th trial bridge. You have the time advantage because I spent a little longer in the outer area of the tomb and came in late. Now, I want to get back what rightfully belongs to me, said Pang Tao coldly. He sounded extremely confident, but the disciples around were not fools. Contemptuous rose in their hearts when they heard of Pang Tao's claim. What a joke! Did he think it was easy to pass the 8th bridges test? If it was so easy, it would not have remained till today. Although Pang Tao was talented in sword skills, and his master was Fan Jianxian, 99% of the people still did not think that he could easily pass the 8th trial bridges test. They thought it was funny that Pang Tao flagrantly claimed the 2 jade slips were meant to be his. As expected, before Jian Wushuang could say anything, Zhong Yi from Narcissus Island rebuked. Pang Tao, you are the core disciple of the Great Compassion sect, and one of the 12 minor kings. How can you carry yourself in such a manner? Opportunities have always resided with the one who is well prepared and competent. Let's not mention that even if you were given the chance, you will never be able to pass the 8th trial bridges test. Now that the opportunity has fallen into junior brother Wushuang's hands. It rightfully belongs to him, keeping to the order of arrival. That's right. Pang Tao, how insolent of you to say that. Su Tong added, Did you just call me insolent? Ha! Pang Tao smiled coldly as he threw frivolous looks at the surrounding disciples. Their expressions changed as the genius disciples from various sects met Pang Tao's gaze. They came from many different sects, and they were also arrogant to a certain extent, but they became timid in the face of Pang Tao. The reverence was not only because of Pang Tao's power, but also due to the Great Compassion sect, where Pang Tao belonged. As the top sect in the Wuxia wilderness, the Great Compassion sect had a transcendent existence and was recognized as an overlord. The sect had always acted somewhat overbearing and arrogant, which the other sects had long gotten used to. Usually, the other sects would try to avoid the Great Compassion sect and tolerated it. No one had the guts to challenge them head-on. Although they witnessed the incident, they felt it had nothing to do with them. Even when they saw Pang Tao acting unscrupulously because of his terrifying background, no one dared to speak out for Narcissus Island. Pang Tao took in all of their expressions and scoffed before speaking again. "Very well, since you call me insolent, I will not push you to dead ends. Jian Wushuang, I can allow you to make a copy of the contents in both jade slips, but you have to hand over the 2 jade slips to me. How about that?" Pang Tao looked down at Jian Wushuang with a touch of loftiness in his words and actions. When the people around heard him, their lips secretly pouted in disgust. However, in Pang Tao's opinion, he was being very kind to allow Jian Wushuang in making a copy of the contents. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up with a strange arc when facing the cold stare from Pang Tao. With a flip of his palms, both jade slips returned into his interspatial ring before folding his hands and casually asked, "What if I don't agree?" Pang Tao's face turned dark. "You don't agree? Then you'll have to die here." "Really? Perhaps I should try." Jian Wushuang kept his smile. Jian Wushuang, Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and the others were surprised by his response. Although Pang Tao was being unreasonable, it was no joke if he were to duel with Pang Tao. "Young boy, it seems that you really wanted to die." Pang Tao's voice was harsh, and a faint murderous intent rose in his eyes. Before he threw out any moves, "Pang Tao, what do you want to do?" A stern voice emerged, followed by several figures rushing in quickly, appearing in front of Jian Wushuang in a blink of an eye, blocking Jian Wushuang behind their bodies. They were the disciples of the Ancient Star Temple headed by Zhuo Bing and Ling Dan. It's the Ancient Star Temple's Ice Queen, and Ling Dan. Ling Dan is one of the 12 minor kings. Someone immediately pointed out the identities of Zhuo Bing and Ling Dan. "Brother, are you okay?" Zhuo Bing turned and looked at Jian Wushuang. "Big sister, am okay? Why are you here?" Jian Wushuang asked with a smile. "We were already in the inner area and were just nearby. Senior brother Ling Dan and I rushed over immediately when I heard that Pang Tao was finding fault with Narcissus Island. Don't worry, big sister is here. I'll not let anyone hurt you," said Zhuo Bing in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang raised his brows. His big sister really treated him well. However, were those people from the Ancient Star Temple able to stop Pang Tao? "Ling Dan, this matter has nothing to do with the Ancient Star Temple. You should leave." Pang Tao stared at Ling Dan with cold eyes. As for Zhuo Bing, she was not a threat at all. Among the younger disciples of Wuxia Wilderness, the 12 minor kings were the most outstanding group. Although some other young cultivators had powers that were close to the 12 minor kings, there was still a gap between their strengths in a real battle. There were many talented disciples standing in front of Pang Tao, but only Ling Dan, one of the 12 minor kings, got his attention. He did not care much about the others. "Sorry, Jian Wushuang is my junior sister, Zhuo Bing's brother. If you're looking for trouble with him, I can't pretend to not see it." Ling Dan looked at Pang Tao solemnly. Ling Dan ranked lower among the 12 minor kings, as neither his strength nor status were as good as Pang Tao. He would not fight against Pang Tao unless necessary. However, he would never let Pang Tao hurt Jian Wushuang for the sake of Zhuobing. Chapter 24-26. The Big Fight. Ling Dan, do you mean you want to bear the brunt of the attack? Do you think you can stop me? Pang Tao coldly challenged. Well, let's find out. Ling Dan was not too afraid. If that's the case, I'll first maim you, then kill the kid. Pang Tao aimed his first shot as soon as he finished speaking. Swoosh! A phantom-like figure swept around violently and dived down along with the emergence of a remarkable sword essence. The sword essence dissipated far and wide as it instantly covered the entire area, just as though a huge ocean of sword essences filled the area between the heavens and earth. Everyone was immersed within that sword essence ocean. This sword essence is not bad. Jian Wushuang secretly nodded. Just from his sword essence alone, he could see that Pang Tao's sword principle understanding had already reached the profound sword principle realm. In fact, he had been at that level for some time and was not far from achieving complete sword principle realm. Pang Tao's figure suddenly appeared from the sword essence. The moment he appeared, slash, 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 3 beams of sword lights gleamed. Those 3 sword light beams were dazzling, each of them obscuring the heavens and the sun, attracting the attention of everyone present. So glaringly bright. Are these sword lights? Why do I feel like there are 3 suns? It's so dazzling and very powerful. Many had to close their eyes as the sword light flashed and blinded their sights. Senior brother Ling Dan, Zhuobing's complexion slightly changed. Pang Tao's strength had exceeded her expectations, and she was worried about Ling Dan. Don't worry, leave it to me. Ling Dan smiled confidently and stepped forward. He flipped his palm, and a rather unusual weapon appeared in his hand. It was nearly a 2 meters long trident. The trident's 3 prongs were extremely sharp. It exuded a faint cold light as the sword light's glitters reflected on its surface. As Ling Dan divine power exploded out, his trident stabbed ahead, and beams of divine power shot out at the speed of lighting from all 3 trident tips, which happened to collide with the 3 sword lights from Pang Tao. Bang! 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 3 loud noises crackled almost at the same time. As divine powers came sweeping down, Ling Dan and Pang Tao's figures clashed into each other again. Swoosh! Swoosh! Clang! Clang! The sounds of wind breaking and collisions between weapons continuously reverberated. Both Pang Tao and Ling Dan were swiftly moving around. Those people around could only notice 2 ghostly figures colliding, but were unable to discern their moves. Judging from appearances, those 2 seemed to be evenly matched. So powerful. Is this the strength of the 12 minor kings? The people around were awe-stricken. Both Pang Tao and Ling Dan were first-class divine demons, but being one of the 12 minor kings, their combat powers were far better than an ordinary first-class divine demons. Even Jian Wushuang was secretly nodding in approval. Although Pang Tao is not a righteous person, he is indeed powerful. His combat powers should have reached the level of peak divine demon realm. He might stand a chance to win if he fights against a true peak divine demon. As for Ling Dan, his strength is still a far cry from Pang Tao, mumbled Jian Wushuang to himself. It may seem that those 2 were evenly matched, but Jian Wushuang had sharp observational skills. He noticed that Ling Dan had tried his best, but Pang Tao was still going easy on him and had not even displayed his full force. True to his observations, a scornful smile appeared on Pang Tao's face after a while. Ling Dan, is this just what you are capable of? Ling Dan's face changed. You think about stopping me with this level of power? It's ridiculous. Pang Tao sneered. His figure that was already moving at high speeds instantly doubled upon being engulfed by the power of loss. Pang Tao was already moving at a terrifying speed when fighting against Ling Dan, and it was already hard for everyone around to see his silhouette. In spite of that, he still doubled up his speed. What was going on? In terms of speed, Pang Tao had completely surpassed Ling Dan. Swoosh! Pang Tao's figure instantly burst out and was too fast for Ling Dan to react. A sword shadow quietly appeared beside Ling Dan. No good. Ling Dan's face drastically changed. He quickly withdrew his trident to resist, only to find that not only had Pang Tao sped up in his movements, but his sword moves were also much faster than before. It was too late for Ling Dan's trident to parry off the attack. Chuck! A beam of sword light pierced through Ling Dan's body. It went into his body with a huge, impactful blow, which was transmitted to Ling Dan's divine body through his battle armor. Puff! Ling Dan directly spouted a big mouthful of blood and fell into an embarrassing state. Pang Tao smiled coldly at the sight. He wasted no time and turned towards Jian Wushuang. Swoosh! The terrifying speed erupted again, but it was aimed directly at Jian Wushuang this time. Ling Dan could not stop him as he had not even recovered from the last attack. Pang Tao was aiming to kill Jian Wushuang. Zhuo Bing was tremendously shocked by the scene, yet she immediately looked at Zhong Yi and Su Tong next to her. Let's join forces and stop him. Okay. Zhong Yi and Su Tong exchanged looks and both nodded solemnly. They came from Narcissus Island and were in the same sect as Jian Wushuang. It was only natural for them to protect Jian Wushuang from Pang Tao's attack. Zhuo Bing, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong attacked at the same time. All three of them were first-class divine demons and were powerful in combat. Together, they were confident that they could manage Pang Tao for a while. When Pang Tao saw the three of them taking action, he contemptuously smiled. Such confidence! Boom! Pang Tao increased his speed again by nearly 30%. One should not take the 30% lightly, as it had completely caught Zhuo Bing, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong by surprise. Zoom! A fierce and swift sword light cut away all obstacles in front of him. Zhuo Bing, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong, the three first-class divine demons, were completely thrown aside. Though all three of them were already giving their best shot, they were still crushed ruthlessly by the sword light. Pang Tao maintained his speed and charged towards Jian Wushuang. Nothing was in his way this time. I was going to spare your life initially as long as you obediently hand over those 2 jade slips, but now, you can't blame me. Even if you're a genius, you would be no different from a useless piece of log after you die. Pang Tao's eyes were chilly. One genius and a useless piece of log both have the same pronunciation on the second word in Chinese, a kind of wordplay by the author. Hence, it's a common saying to call someone gifted genius, which is, and refer to someone weak as. Chapter 24-27. Long Zishan Jian Wushuang had stood at the same spot, observing Pang Tao injuring Ling Dan before Zhuo Bing, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong continued with their collaborative attacks after Pang Tao had dispersed them. Despite all that, his face remained incredibly calm and still, but concealed deep in his eyes was a sharp, shining beam of light. Whoosh! In a flash, Pang Tao had already appeared before Jian Wushuang. Die, kid! Pang Tao's viciousness was overwhelming, and coupled with his terrifying speed, he was about to cut off Jian Wushuang's head with the sword in his hand. Stop! A sudden yell exploded in the air. Every single person's heart trembled, as that was a yell that did not allow disobedience. Even Pang Tao could not help but to stop his motion when hearing that explosive yell. He looked behind himself and saw a young man in purple armor. It's Long Zishan, 3rd ranked, one of the 12 minor kings from Great Compassion sect. People around immediately recognized the man in purple armor. Senior brother Zishan? Pang Tao's face changed. If he was someone else, Pang Tao would have completely ignored him. However, Long Zishan was not only his senior brother, but also someone he very much respected. "What are you doing, Pang Tao?" Long Zishan's expression was stern. "Senior brother Zishan, the 8th trial bridge has been broken through by Jian Wushuang. He now possesses the relics that Purple Blood Saint had left behind. I only want to take back what's rightfully mine," replied Pang Tao. "What a joke! The rules have always been such that the relics belong to one with good morals. Purple Blood Saint's legacy naturally goes to him, since the trial has been broken through by this junior brother from Narcissus Island. What do you think you're doing? Are you trying to rob? Or are you trying to bully others? You've embarrassed all of us in the Great Compassion Sect." Long Zishan did not save Pang Tao's face at all as he scolded him in front of everyone. "Senior brother Zishan." Pang Tao's face was filled with dissatisfaction. He also felt a little angry inside and was ready to express it. "Step back immediately." Long Zishan quietly growled, but secretly gave Pang Tao a look. Pang Tao understood the signal and stepped back, even though he was not satisfied. Seeing that Pang Tao had listened to him, Long Zishan sighed in relief and immediately looked over at Jian Wushuang with his attitude becoming a lot warmer. "You must be junior brother Wushuang. From Narcissus Island, my hot-headed junior brother Pang Tao recklessly took action just now. Sorry for offending you. Here's an interspatial ring with plenty of elixirs inside it. Please take it as a token of apology. We hope you and all the friends from Narcissus Island will forgive us." Long Zishan tossed over an interspatial ring that he had prepared towards Jian Wushuang as he was speaking. Jian Wushuang grabbed the ring, but did not look inside it. He deeply looked at Long Zishan with a strange light in his eyes. All those disciples around started praising him in their minds. Among the 4 minor kings in the Great Compassion Sect, Long Zishan was considered the most mild-mannered and enjoyed the highest acclaim. His appearance today proved the saying to be true. Long Zishan was a very reasonable person judging from his apologetic actions. He was also a very good representative of the Great Compassion Sect, causing everyone to feel a sense of respect towards them. However, Pang Tao's expression was extremely uneasy. He did not say anything, but had already sent a message through his token and asked Long Zishan, "Senior brother Zishan, what's happening here?" Pang Tao was slightly puzzled. Long Zishan secretly replied to him, "Junior brother, you have gone a little overboard today. It's true that the Great Compassion Sect is the largest sect in Wuxia Wilderness, the most powerful existence. We can usually do whatever we want in Wuxia Wilderness, and others would have let us have our way even though we're being a little reckless. They would even swallow their pride to not offend us. But that's also on the basis that we could find certain excuses or reasoning on our side. As for today, if you found even just a little bit of reasoning or excuses, you could have done whatever you wanted. Even if you killed Jian Wushuang, so be it. You could have even killed Zhong Yi of Narcissus Island and Ling Dan of Ancient Star Temple without fear, and the Great Compassion Sect would back you up after you've done it. The problem here is that you're obviously being unreasonable. The 8th Trial Bridges Challenge was broken through by Jian Wushuang with his very own abilities, and now you're asking for what he has earned. That's simply robbery. In addition, you're being so reckless in front of everyone. At this moment, a few elders from Narcissus Island outside have already reached senior brother Tu Qiancheng, and a few of our elders questioning the thieving behavior of Great Compassion Sect's disciples. Our elders from the Great Compassion Sect understood that we're in the wrong and could not give a convincing answer. Hence the reason they sent me here to stop you. Is that so? Pang Tao finally understood. He knew that senior brother Zishan was usually more conniving and often acted as unreasonable as they were, sometimes even more reckless. Senior brother Zishan had always let him be, but he was there to represent the sect and scolded him in front of so many people. Listen, junior brother Pang Tao. As long as we have reasons or excuses, you can do whatever you want. That's the great compassion sect's way of being. However, if what you do doesn't come with a reason and was simply because you want to destroy someone, that's fine as well. However, you will have to do it in the dark and not out in public. You can't be so careless, especially right before all these sections. Do you understand? Long Zishan advised. Understood, senior brother Zishan, but that Jian Wushuang, Pang Tao still did not feel satisfied. You fool, you definitely can't kill him in front of so many people, but you can always wait a little while. When the 6 positions appear, all disciples from every sect would definitely try to frantically fight for it. It would be a bloodbath at that time, and you wouldn't have to worry anymore. Wouldn't it be easier to kill Jian Wushuang? Then, Long Zishan giggled. Pang Tao felt a little excited inside. Yes. Now I understand. When we're in the midst of a battle, I'll stand by Jian Wushuang and wait for my chance. If Jian Wushuang was also going to fight for a position, I'll kill him with the most thorough methods. Even if he doesn't partake in the competition, I could still find ways to push him into the battlefield, which would be merciless at that point. Narcissus Island probably wouldn't dare to say much if I accidentally killed him then. At most, I would apologize to them afterward. Apologize? Since it's on the battlefield, getting killed in chaos would only be due to his own inadequacy. Why the need to apologize? Long Zishan sneered frostily. Pang Tao's anger was completely under control after hearing what Long Zishan had said. He raised his head again and looked at Jian Wushuang with his icy cold eyes. Chapter 24-28. News spreading. Senior brother Zishan is right. I have lots of opportunities to kill him. I'll let the kid live for a few more days, since that's the case, Pang Tao told himself. However, what he did not know was that Jian Wushuang looked at him with a touch of ridicule. In Pang Tao's mind, Jian Wushuang had managed to live because of Long Zishan's arrival. On the contrary, the person Long Zishan had rescued was actually in fact Pang Tao himself. During that split second, Jian Wushuang had the intention to kill Pang Tao. If Long Zishan had not arrived in time, Pang Tao would have turned into a corpse. However, neither Pang Tao, Long Zishan, nor anyone around knew that. At the surface, Long Zishan was still scolding Pang Tao. Junior brother, you're really too reckless this time. Prepare for your punishment when you go back. Understood. Pang Tao nodded without any feeling of dissatisfaction. Come with me, said Long Zishan, who led Pang Tao and the rest of his group to leave this place. All the disciples from Narcissus Island gave a huge sigh of relief after watching Long Zishan, Pang Tao, and the rest left this place. They're finally gone. Zhong Yi and Su Tong both felt a burden unloaded. Pang Tao alone had already given them an immense amount of pressure. They could not imagine how terrorizing it would be if Long Zishan joined in the mix. Little brother, are you all right? Xue Bing went up to Jian Wushuang. I'm fine, but I feel bad getting senior brother Ling Dan involved. Jian Wushuang looked at Ling Dan. Ling Dan was the first one who tried stopping Pang Tao, but got injured instead. His face was still pale. I'll live. It's more important that junior brother Wushuang is all right. Ling Dan smiled after noticing Jian Wushuang was looking at him. Jian Wushuang was Xue Bing's younger brother. Therefore, he wanted to do his best to protect Jian Wushuang in front of Xue Bing. Unfortunately, his ability was not up to par. Luckily, not all disciples from the Great Compassion sect are bullies. At least this Long Zishan is reasonable and knows his place, said Xue Bing. Reasonable. Know his place. He's just smarter. That's all. Jian Wushuang could not help but laughed. It was true. Even though they were both core disciples of the Great Compassion sect and one of the 12 minor kings, Long Zishan was a lot smarter than Pang Tao. At the very least, in terms of his behavior and mannerisms, Long Zishan had a good reputation on the surface. However, who knew what kind of person was he in the dark? Junior brother Wu Shuang. All the disciples from Narcissus Island walked up to him. Zhong Yi and Su Tong both looked at Jian Wushuang with mixed emotions. Junior brother Wushuang, was what Pang Tao just said true? The rest of the disciples also looked at Jian Wushuang, waiting for an answer. Although they believed a big part of it, they still felt it was hard to believe, hence they needed to hear it from Jian Wushuang himself. Looking at everyone's answer-seeking eyes, Jian Wushuang laughed. That was a very long time ago. It's no big deal. Jian Wushuang sounded extremely calm, but the fact he had admitted it remained. At that point, all of them, Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and all the Narcissus Island disciples on site, gasped, feeling even more stunned. They finally understood why Elder Wu Jin would defend Jian Wushuang with all his might and send him into Saint's tomb. It turned out that it was not due to any special relationship between them, but because Elder Wu Jin knew of Jian Wushuang's background as a rarely seen superior demon. A superior demon, such as him, should deserve to get the highest level of nurturing. Zhong Yi took a deep breath and continued asking, Junior brother Wushuang, there's something that I don't quite understand. When Bai Yu and Elder Wu Jin invited you at the same time, why did you reject the Great Compassion sect to become the personal disciple of Fan Jianxian? Instead, you chose to become a regular outer disciple on Narcissus Island. The rest of them also had the same question. People tend to move up to higher places. Anybody would wish to join sects that were stronger to get more resources and have more improvement space. Perhaps it was understandable that Jian Wushuang refused to join the Great Compassion sect out of dislike for them. However, what was incomprehensible was that he happily became an outer disciple when he could have easily become a Narcissus Island core disciple, or even the Lord's personal disciple. Jian Wushuang laughed and said, The reason is simple. I just didn't want too many constraints. That's it. Everyone was surprised. That is it. Jian Wushuang nodded again. The core disciples from Narcissus Island speechlessly looked at each other and shrugged in the end. All of them could only assume that a superior demon like Jian Wushuang's thought process was different from theirs. Little brother, at this moment, the genius disciples in the entire Saint's tomb have already known about you inheriting the relics left behind by Purple Blood Saint. There are bound to be people with inconceivable ideas. You need to be careful from now on, especially that Pang Tao, I've got a feeling he won't just stop here, said Zhuobing solemnly. Yes, I understand. I'll be careful, said Jian Wushuang. The field very soon became quiet. The many various sects disciples who came to watch had also left. The news spread like wildfire as well upon their departure. It did not take long before every sect's genius disciples in Saint's tomb knew that Jian Wushuang had the items left behind by Purple Blood Saint. At the same time, the story of Jian Wushuang's terrifying talents had also spread to every corner of Saint's tomb. All of a sudden, there was a huge quake among the people in Saint's tomb. It could not be helped because Jian Wushuang's battle records were too incredible. There was nobody who was unmoved by that story when they heard it. His name began to spread among the sects for the very first time as Jian Wushuang, an ultimate demon who lived among people. In a hidden room within Saint's tomb, Crimson Stone Saint's remnant consciousness had always been there, and that consciousness was extended into every corner of the tomb. Anything that happened within could not escape his knowledge. Naturally, he had noticed when Pang Tao and his gang were picking a fight with Jian Wushuang. The person he was interested in was not Pang Tao, but Jian Wushuang instead. Anyways, He had always been interested in Jian Wushuang. Crimson Stone, Saint had also heard everything Pang Tao said, the various information about Jian Wushuang. Profound achievement in sword principles at 16 years old. Killed third-class divine demon with the level of chaotic realm and overpowered 2 second-class divine demon head-to-head at 19 years old. Achieved completion in sword principles as a peak stage chaotic realm, passed the 8th trial bridges challenges, and obtained the relics left behind by Purple Blood Saint this year at 21 years old. Ha! This little boy called Jian Wushuang really is not just talented. Huh? Chapter 24-29. Joining hands, even Crimson Stone, Saint exclaimed after knowing about Jian Wushuang's story. He was a well-respected undying saint and had witnessed various genius experts amidst traveling throughout the ancient god domain when he was still immortal. Among them, there were some truly mesmerizing demons and monsters. Even so, he had never heard of a 16-year-old demon achieving profound achievement regardless of how impressive that 16-year-old was. As for an early-stage chaotic realm that could go head-on and overpower a second-class divine demon, that was even more unbelievable. If not hearing it directly from Gold Cauldron Sext Na Qianyuan, even Crimson Stone, Saint himself would have trouble believing it, not to mention genius disciples from various sections. Even Crimson Stone, Saint himself, had never seen or even heard of such a monster. Crimson Stone, Saint became even more curious about Jian Wushuang after discovering it. If he could overpower second-class divine demon while still being an early-stage chaotic realm, his ability must have gone up a whole lot now that he's at the peak stage chaotic realm and also had achieved a breakthrough in his sword principle cultivation level. I suppose his battle strength is perhaps comparable to a peak divine demon. I wonder where he is positioned in comparison to those few geniuses in the tomb. In a few more days, I want to observe in detail when the competition for those 6 positions begins. After that, it was extremely peaceful in the saint's tomb. Genius disciples from all sects tried breaking through those challenges on the Bridge of Trials, with nobody else creating any more troubles. As for Jian Wushuang, although everyone knew that he possessed Purple Blood Saint's relics, and some felt slight greed to possess them, all of them held back with nobody daring to take any actions. Almost in the blink of an eye, Saint's tomb had been opened for almost a month. In the fields where Narcissus Island disciples gathered, the disciples from Ancient Star Temple had chosen to station there as well. Xue Bing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong gathered together. It's almost time. If nothing's out of expectations, the competition for those 6 positions will begin these few days, said Ling Dan, Feng Tian Scroll. For all of us, it's such a precious opportunity to be able to study Feng Tian Scroll. Hence, when those 6 positions appear, there's bound to be a bloodied fight over it, mumbled Xue Bing. Zhong Yi and Su Tong, I gather you're both interested in those positions as well? Ling Dan looked at them. That's for sure. Zhong Yi and Su Tong simultaneously nodded. Why don't we join hands, since that's the case? Ling Dan suggested. Joining hands. Zhong Yi and Su Tong both felt surprised. It's such that if there is a position token that appears near our area when the competition begins, all 4 of us could use our full might to fight for it. However, if any among us successfully obtains a position token, the other 3 should not fight for it, and have to do their best to help him fend off genius disciples from other sects instead, said Ling Dan. Hearing that, Zhong Yi and Su Tong looked at each other and nodded without much hesitation. Sure, it would be exceptionally difficult to get one position token relying only on junior sister Su Tong and myself. However, if we join forces with Brother Ling Dan and Miss Xue Bing, we might be able to get one if luck permits, said Zhong Yi. Well then, it's decided. From my investigation today, even though there are many sects surrounding us in this area, there aren't many who are very skilled. Furthermore, in the only 12 minor king, if we four join hands and a position token really appears around here, there shouldn't be anyone qualified to fight against us over it. Ling Dan smiled. However, as soon as he spoke, there were a few black dots dashing towards them from the void not far away. They soon had appeared within their sight. These are people from the Great Compassion sect. With Pang Tao leading, what is he doing here? Shuo Bing, Ling Dan, and the other Narcissus Island disciples were stunned. However, Pang Tao did not come up to provoke them this time. They instead stopped somewhere rather close to them. Afterward, the 10 Great Compassion sect disciples, led by Pang Tao, found a place and settled down. Damn it, this Pang Tao also plans to wait in this area. Ling Dan said quietly. Saint's tomb was very large, and even though the inner area was not as big as the outer area, it was still not a small place per se. Those 6 position tokens that symbolized the right to study Feng Tian scroll could appear at any time on any corner of the inner area. They could appear anywhere, so it was largely luck dependent on whether one could find them. All the various sects' genius disciples were scattered in different places within the inner area, waiting patiently for their opportunities. However, no sects wished for any opponents who could form a threat to lurk around the area they were in. It would only mean that a strenuous fight would occur with such an opponent around should a position token appear in that area. Pang Tao from the Great Compassion sect was undoubtedly a strong opponent in the eyes of disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple. Previously, Ling Dan thought that if Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island joined hands, they could dominate that area and no other sects could withstand them. However, now that Pang Tao had appeared, the situation was completely different. This Pang Tao, he's most probably here for us, said Zhong Yi coldly. Correct. When he was taken away by Long Zishan, I could see how dissatisfied he was and would look for a chance to make a move on junior brother Wu Shuang. And now he simply settles close to us. As soon as the competition begins, he would have the chance to do something to junior brother Wu Shuang. Su Tong agreed. Little brother. Shuo Bing's expression turned cold and called out. Jian Wu Shuang, who was sitting on a broken rock studying purple blood sword principle, gradually opened his eyes and walked over. Big sister, what is the matter? Jian Wu Shuang smiled. Look over there. Shuo Bing signaled Jian Wu Shuang with her eyes. Jian Wu Shuang immediately looked at the direction she was gazing at, noticing Pang Tao and the others from the Great Compassion sect. Oh, they're camping close by. Looks like he's looking for a chance to get me. Jian Wu Shuang smiled. It's good that you know. He wouldn't make a move since the competition for those token positions hasn't begun. However, the inner area will be incredibly chaotic once it starts. If such a token appears in our area, all of us, including Pang Tao, will fight for it. You need to retreat to the battlefield's edge and not join in or stay too close to avoid getting dragged into it, so that Pang Tao couldn't find a chance. Understand? Shuo Bing advised. Gotcha, though be careful. My life is extremely precious after all. Jian Wu Shuang smiled mildly, with not the least bit of worry in his mind. Chapter 2430. The frenzy began. Crimson stone. Saint flipped his hand in the hidden space, and a white-colored token suddenly appeared. He mysteriously smiled while looking at the white token. It's about time, let's begin. The first position, token. Kid, we'll see how you fare. Crimson Stone Saint swung his hand as he exclaimed, turning the white token into a flash before it vanished. Gong. The giant structure of the saint's tomb shook. The tremors were very violent, as if the grounds were shattering and mountains moving. The sudden changes startled those genius disciples in the inner area. Is it starting? Many disciples' eyes were burning with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, in the area where Jian Wushuang was located, Narcissus Island, Ancient Star Temple, Great Compassion Sect led by Pang Tao, and disciples from many other sects were gathered there and waited calmly. Jian Wushuang immediately stood up with everyone when the saint's tomb started trembling. It's coming. I wonder where the first position token will appear. Shuabing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong felt fanatically excited. All of them were truly looking forward to it. Right then, a roaring rumble tore through the air. The ground suddenly broke open in the area where Jian Wushuang and his companions were shooting up a blinding white light beam from below. In the blink of an eye, the white light moved into the middle of the void and appeared in front of all those disciples. The genius disciples on the scene were all stunned. That's a position token? The first position token. A number of them could not recover from the amazement. One should know that the inner area was extremely large, and the place those 6 position tokens would appear was random. Those genius disciples from various sects could only rely on their own luck. Obviously, none of those disciples expected such good fortune to have the first position token appearing in their local area. It was a short surprise, which became chaotic the next moment. Do it. Grab it quick. The token is mine. Shouts suddenly filled the air. The total number of genius disciples was around 100, and in that instant, other than a small number of second-class divine demons, most disciples dashed towards the floating white token in the void. For example, Pang Tao from the Great Compassion Sect did not miss a beat, taking the lead with 2 first-class and 7 second-class divine demons from his sect following right behind him. Pang Tao's face was stern as he had set his mind in seizing the white token. Little brother, stay far away and don't get involved in the battle. After Zhuabing advised Jian Wushuang, she turned to her companions. Everyone, let's do this. Right. Move. Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, Su Tong, along with the more capable second-class divine demon disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple sprung into action. Lines of figures charged rapidly towards the white token. As for Jian Wushuang, he did not take action at this first moment. He stood there at the same place and observed calmly instead. The fight had begun. Haha, it's mine. The first token is mine. A young man in an elegant sky blue, long robe laughed maniacally. He was a second-class divine demon that was physically the closest to the white token, hence he was the first to arrive and naturally held the white token in his hand. However, as soon as he caught the token and was about to keep it in his interspatial ring, "Watch out!" somebody suddenly shouted. The warning came from a first-class divine demon, who was also from the same sect as the young man. The young man's face changed, but he could not react in time as a strange scarlet light beam went through his body and instantly ended his life. A petite young lady in red with a frosty expression was right next to the young man, and the strange scarlet light was actually her cold-looking spear, which was currently floating in front of her. She immediately reached out to grab the white token upon killing the young man. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 fatal attacks were directed right at her. 2 of those attacks were sent by 2 second-class divine demons. However, the third stroke was released by a first-class divine demon. Damn! The young lady in red clenched her teeth, forcibly halted her steps, and dashed sideways at the same time to avoid those attacks. A ghastly dark figure appeared next to the young man's body and extended his large hand to take the young man's interspatial ring and white token. Gong! A giant mountain appeared out of nowhere above the darkly clad figure, and more than 10 attacks were sent out from around him at the same time. No, the darkly clad figure got stunned. Although he was quite a capable first-class divine demon, It was just too difficult facing so many attacks from every direction. Boom, boom, boom. Noises of impacts were heard. The darkly clad figure gave his all, but still could not ward off all the attacks. Finally, his body suddenly collapsed after getting hit by a few attacks. Thus ended the life of a first-class divine demon. Just in such a short time, 2 divine demons, a second class and a first class, respectively died under a crowd of attacks. However, that was only the beginning. Following that, kill, kill. It'll kill whoever seizes the token. The position token is mine. Anybody who dares to take it will receive no mercy. Manically shouts filled the edge of the skies. The competition started as soon as the position token appeared, and so were the killings. This is pretty crazy. Jian Wushuang stood idly at the edge of the battlefield and observed everything that was happening. Those sect geniuses could still coexist peacefully, not only in the outer area, but also in the inner area when trying out the challenges on the Bridge of Trials. However, they started their bloody fights as soon as the position token appeared. This only showed the importance of the position token and the strong desires of all disciples from every sect over the Fengtian scroll. However, due to the extremely crazy competition, more than 10 disciples fell shortly after the battle started, and one of them was even a first-class divine demon. After all, first-class divine demons usually had a safety token and would break it as soon as they encountered a crisis. Up to that point, nobody had the chance to store the white token into their interspatial ring. As soon as someone got close to the white token, people around would issue coordinated attacks and kill them on the spot. Hence, the white token was still floating midair and illuminating its white light, stirring greed in all of the disciples there. In such a frenzied competition, even first-class divine demons who were extremely capable did not dare to be reckless. Chapter 24:31. The seas there were as many as 100 genius disciples from various sects surrounding the white token in that area, but no one dared to take it, even Pang Tao, who was considered the strongest among all. Pang Tao gathered with a few disciples from the Great Compassion sect. "Senior brother Pang Tao, aren't we taking it?" asked a first-class divine demon disciple. "If we do it now, we'll immediately become everyone's target. Be patient and give it some time." Pang Tao waved his hand. Meanwhile, Zhuo Bing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong also stood together. "What now?" Su Tong frowned hard. "We're obviously at a deadlock right now. No one has the guts to step up because doing so means he'll be attacked by everyone. Even Pang Tao doesn't dare to make a move." Zhong Yi gazed at Pang Tao once and said coldly, "This can't go on forever. Somebody has to break the deadlock." Ling Dawn's expression turned gloomy and looked at Zhuo Bing next to him. Junior sister, Zhuo Bing could understand Ling Dawn's mind through that look. She nodded slightly but still reminded him, "Be careful." "Don't worry, worst comes to worst. I'll just use the safety token." Ling Dan plainly smiled and suddenly dashed out. Whoosh! Ling Dan rushed towards the white token at breakneck speeds. In that situation, everyone was keenly watching the white token and being very cautious of each other. As soon as Ling Dan took action, he attracted everyone's attention. "Kill him! Die!" A large number of the surrounding disciples, including tens of second-class divine demon and a few first-class divine demons, came rushing towards Ling Dan. At that juncture, no one cared who he was or what was his background. So what if he was one of the 12 minor kings? He would receive no mercy since he dared to touch the position token. Ling Dawn's expression turned gloomy upon noticing the wave of attacks rolling towards him, but he did not stop. Just when all the attacks were about to fall on him, there was a loud ring and a thick layer of golden light rose from his body. The golden light suddenly formed into a golden turtle, wrapping Ling Dan completely within it. All the attacks fell on the golden turtle and made continuous clashing noises. After a wave of clashing noises, the golden turtle broke apart, and Ling Dawn's body suffered some injuries with blood streaming down a corner of his mouth. Even so, he had withstood the strong waves of attacks. Shuo Bing had also taken actions when everyone frenziedly attacked Ling Dan. She was incredibly fast and arrived next to the white token in the blink of an eye. She swiftly waved her hand, and the white token that had been floating in the void had finally been kept in her interspatial ring. That sight simply made all the genius disciples roll their eyes wide with jealousy. No, let go of the token. Drop dead. Ling Dan appeared next to Zhuo Bing in the first moment. The golden turtle rose from his body once again, but it was a lot dimmer this time. Zhuo Bing had a solemn look on her face, and her body was also glowing with a layer of golden light. They joined hands to fend off those disciples' attacks while propelling themselves towards the direction of Narcissus Island disciples. "Friends, please give us a hand," said Ling Dan with a low tone. "No problem." Zhong Yi and Su Tong did not hesitate. Before the fight started, they had agreed to join hands. After joining hands, regardless of who seized the token, the other three would do their best to give a helping hand to that person. Zhong Yi and Su Tong would naturally do everything they could to help since Zhuo Bing and Ling Dan had obtained the white token. Zhong Yi and Su Tong immediately made their moves. That triggered the anger of everyone surrounding them. It'll be damned. Narcissus Island is joining hands with Ancient Star Temple. Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple each have 2 first-class divine demon. That's a total of 4, and among them is Ling Dan, a 12 minor king expert. So what? They dared to take the token, so they deserve to die all the same. Kill! Don't let them get away. The rest of the genius disciples from various sects agreed and surrounded the 4 of them. Zhuo Bing and company made up a coalition of 4 first-class divine demon with the second-class divine demon disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple were also trying their best to assist from the sideline. In such a situation, they could more or less withstand the attacks from the rest. Their next step was to break out from the crowd. As long as they broke out of it, the various sects' genius disciples would find it difficult to do anything to them. Careful! Quickly, this way! When the 4 first-class divine demons joined hands and continuously withstood the crowd's attacks, Zhuo Bing also tried getting close to the edge of the crowd. Hey, raise a chance! Zhuo Bing felt a little excited. From the look of this situation, the 4 divine demons coalition could very possibly break out of the crowd. However, all of a sudden, "Junior sister, watch out!" shouted someone. Zhuo Bing immediately looked ahead and saw a piercing light sweeping towards her. That was a sword light, an extremely blinding sword light. Tracing back the source of the sword light was Pang Tao, who was projecting a strong energy tide. Together with him were another 2 great compassion sects first-class divine demons. Zhuo Bing's face changed, and the long red staff in her hand suddenly turned into a long snake furiously charging outwards. However, when the red staff and blinding sword light collided, that staff, which supposedly carried a heaven-shattering fury, had been deflected, and Zhuo Bing had to take several steps backward. The few retreating steps caused her to fall back into the crowd. Kill! Everyone around her took the opportunity and charged towards her. Damn it! Zhuo Bing could not hide her frustration. Pang Tao finally can't stay still anymore. Ling Dawn's eyes were incredibly gloomy. Supposedly, with 4 first-class divine demons, joining hands meant that they could take over the area and had a very big chance of seizing the token. But with Pang Tao's appearance, the abilities that Pang Tao displayed could completely crush all 4 of them. Ice Queen, give me the token, or you will die. Pang Tao stared at Zhuo Bing coldly. Humph, Are you trying to scare me? You think I would be shaken? Shuo Bing humphed frostily. She had a safety token with her. If she really came across a crisis, she could always escape directly with the safety token. Want to kill her? Pang Tao did not have the skills to do so. You're looking for death. Pang Tao was furious and immediately dashed out. Terrifying energy and power suddenly pressed against Shuo Bing. Although she was an extremely capable first-class divine demon, when facing Pang Tao, who was one of the 12 minor kings, her mind still felt immense pressure. Chapter 24:32. Purple Light Phantom Whoosh. 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 The blinding sword light flashed again. Obviously, Pang Tao had no mercy towards a lady as he completely exerted his sword skills. His speed had reached its very limit along with his non-stop attack strokes raining down on Shuo Bing. Facing such sword skills, Shuo Bing could only give her all to ward off those attacks, but it was incredibly difficult. Junior sister, I'll block him. Ling Dan rushed over and immediately blocked Pang Tao. Are you sure you can? Pang Tao chuckled. Suddenly the power and speed of his hands surged even more. Shuo Bing and her coalition were already under immense pressure with only Pang Tao himself, not forgetting to mention that Pang Tao was not the only person she had to worry about. There were other disciples around who also wanted to take her down. Shuo Bing and the rest could not hold on much longer under their collective assaults. No, we can't hold on much longer, growled Su Tong quietly from the side. Damn, do I really have to forego the token that I have already acquired? Shuo Bing's face turned frosty. The position token, right then, was kept inside her interspatial ring. She would surely not want to give up something that she had already obtained. However, the 4 of them had already fallen inside a deadly circle, which was almost impossible to break out. In such a situation, if she did not release the token, she would perhaps have to break the safety token and leave Saint's Tomb. Even if they escaped, they would still have to leave the position token behind. We have no choice. Junior sister, give it up for now. Let's wait for another chance to take it back. Ling Dan sent a message to Shuo Bing. He was the one who had to endure the biggest pressure among the 4 of them, as he had already taken some injuries when he tried helping Shuo Bing to obtain the token. After that, he not only had to face Pang Tao, but another first-class divine demon from the Great Compassion Sect was also targeting him. He was being completely overpowered and was just barely hanging on. If this continues for another short moment, he would have no choice but to break the safety token. Seeing that was the case while still feeling extremely unwilling, Shuo Bing gritted her teeth and made up her mind. As long the verdant hills remained, there would be no shortages of firewood won. Shuo Bing had made up her mind to let go of the position token. However, just as Shuo Bing and her coalition were being pushed to the edge, no one realized that Jian Wushuang had already disappeared from where he stood outside the battlefield. Jian Wushuang was already in the middle of the crowd at the battlefield's center when he reappeared, standing right behind Shuo Bing. Big sister, need help? Without any fair warning, Jian Wushuang's voice sounded next to Shuo Bing's ear. Shuo Bing shuddered and looked at Jian Wushuang. Little brother, what are you doing here? Shuo Bing was shocked. She had advised him many times not to get involved in the fight for the positions, not to even get too close to the battlefield in order to avoid giving Pang Tao any opportunity to attack him. Jian Wushuang promised her during that time as well. If that was the case, why did Jian Wushuang directly appear on the battlefield? Go! Leave now! Shuo Bing yelled. However, Jian Wushuang did not move. On the side, Pang Tao had also noticed Jian Wushuang's arrival. Ha ha! This kid came into the battlefield like an idiot trying to help his big sis. Pang Tao could not hide his excitement. Right on. I was still wondering when I could kill him, and now he presented himself as a gift. Just as the saying goes, You choose not the paved path to heaven, but break into a gateless hell 1L. Pang Tao's eyes were also shining with a thick light of greed. He immediately made up his mind after seeing Jian Wushuang. You two keep Ling Dan busy, instructed Pang Tao. The other two first-class divine demons from Great Compassion sect immediately went up and kept Ling Dan in a tight web of attacks. With his hands being free, Pang Tao went straight to Jian Wushuang. Pang Tao, stop. I'll give you the position token. Shuabing shouted. Pang Tao sneered. Position token? The position token would need time to fight over it, but Jian Wushuang is standing right in front of me. Pang Tao had no hesitation in his mind. He had already calculated that there would still be enough time to fight for the position token after killing Jian Wushuang and obtaining Purple Blood Saint's relics. Little brother, run. Run now. Shuabing shouted in a frenzy after seeing Pang Tao charging at Jian Wushuang with full ferocity. However, Jian Wushuang did not have any intention to escape. He looked straight at Pang Tao. The Blood Mountain sword had appeared with a flip of his palm. Jian Wushuang then immediately shifted his figure and took the initiative to charge at Pang Tao. You want to die? Not only did Pang Tao not feel any anger, but he also laughed in return, which his facial expression becoming vicious. Boy, you're the one who's seeking death. Don't blame me. Die. With a ring, a blinding sword light lit up. It was like a little sun shining across the lands. Many people around shut their eyes because of the sword's brightness. That stroke had contained Pang Tao's killing intent and hatred, which were absolutely terrifying. Most importantly, his speed was incredibly fast. It was so fast that nobody around could offer assistance. Little brother. Shuabing opened her eyes wide, feeling desperate. However, Jian Wushuang, who was floating calmly, had also moved the Blood Mountain sword in his hand. Swing, a poignantly beautiful sword light flashed. The sword light contained a mild purple that looked incomparably gorgeous as it sliced through the void. The purple sword light was not blinding, but incredibly demonic, as if the shadows of a purple-colored phantom flying by. The energy from it was calm and leisurely, not as devastating as Pang Tao's stroke. However, it was such a stroke that made Pang Tao's pupils slightly shrink when the beautiful purple light flashed by. This stroke doesn't seem usual. Right when Pang Tao noticed something, Jian Wushuang and Pang Tao had passed by each other. Jian Wushuang stood behind Pang Tao with his sword in one hand. Sword like shadows. Sword like spirits. Drive the sword with shadows. Drive the sword with spirits. So very beautiful, like the shadows and spirits. In the purple blood sword principle that Purple Blood Saint created, the third form, Purple Light Phantom, is actually the most beautiful stroke. Jian Wushuang wore a mild smile on his face and mumbled to himself as blood was dripping on the tip of his Blood Mountain sword, as if time and space were frozen. The many genius disciples, including Zhuabing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong, had all stopped their motions and looked at his direction. Shocked filled their eyes. Many people did not see clearly what actually had happened. They could only see that Pang Tao stood like a statue in one place, frozen. His eyes were hollow but filled with absolute horror and with even more disbelief. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but those two words were all he could let out. Phew! A gust of wind blew by, and a sizable head went flying.